sexy Mercedes. Well, she loved to dance and she got that funky dance that drive the caballeros wild. She dances back and forth and she dances side to side. It's a Hilario, her move, Hilario, her style. Las bonitas señoritas, oh, I love them, las bonitas señoritas. I'm thinking of them, las bonitas señoritas. I dream about them, they're like the stars, they're like the moon. I just can't live without them, las bonitas señoritas.
Meeting the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? I'm here.
Here.
Here. Here. Here. Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Okay, we have one additional item tonight, and I'd like to do that first. And I'd like to announce that the City Council has reached an agreement with a new city manager. The Council has selected Brian Kenner, currently the Chief Operating Officer for the Deputy Mayor's Office of Planning and Economic Development for the District of Columbia. We believe that Mr. Kenner's strengths in the area of public-private partnerships, budget and finance, and economic development are well suited to provide the city with the leadership needed as we move into the future. Mr. Kenner brings a wealth of experience in the areas of strategic planning, staff relations, and collaboration as well. We believe his addition will be beneficial for our community. His work for the District of Columbia has included managing a team that completed the reuse plan for the Walter Reed Army Medical Center site, and similarly leading a team that developed and implemented a planning and redevelopment framework for the St. Elizabeth's East Campus. He also served as the primary liaison for the D.C. Housing Strategy Task Force, which created a 5-year plan for affordable housing strategy in the city. He's also worked as a senior fund manager of the Community Investment Group at Fannie Mae, served as vice president of the Public Institutions Group at Jones Lang LaSalle, specializing in public-private initiatives, as a manager of the Government Real Estate Advisory Services Consulting Practice at Ernst & Young, and as a Presidential Management Fellow for the federal government. He's an impressive speaker and writer, and those who know him well describe him as approachable and patient. We all look forward to working with him in the years ahead as we build on the strong position that the City of Tacoma Park is in while trying to resolve continuing issues and face new challenges. We also greatly appreciate the leadership, time, and effort Suzanne Ludlow has put into managing both the acting city manager and deputy city manager roles over the last few months. She's been instrumental in the success of many projects, including our budget process for fiscal year 2014. She'll continue as acting city manager until Mr. Kenner's arrival in June. And Mr. Kenner is here with us this evening, and I'd like to introduce him to the community and give him a chance to say a few words. Welcome.
Thank you.
If you want to come up to the podium.
Well, thank you very much, council members, mayor. It is a great privilege that I am here. Very excited. I've had some, I think as you mentioned, some experiences in the past, both on the city level as well as in the private sector that I think prepare me hopefully for the challenges to come. I was very much attracted to Tacoma Park in terms of the diverse citizenry that you all have here. I think there's some real opportunities for growth, and just look forward to working with you. Also want to thank many of the citizen members that were on the review panel. I know some of them are here tonight. So thank you very much for the time and attention that you all took to go through the candidates. And just very anxious to get started later on in June. So just look forward to working with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Kenner will be staying here for a little while, then has to leave to go pick up his wife. We don't have any other additional agenda items for this evening. I do want to provide just a quick update on a couple upcoming items. A reminder that this Sunday, May 19th, is the Celebrate Tacoma Festival from 1 to 5 p.m. at Tacoma Piney Branch Neighborhood Park, and that includes the Azalea Awards at 4 o'clock. Excuse me. Next Monday, May 20th, we have a public hearing on amendments to the Tacoma Park Code, Chapter 6 Housing, and we have a special session with second reading of all the budgeted ordinances that we have first reading of this evening. Next week, we also have discussion of proposed revisions to the code on peddlers and transient merchants, and we have a council discussion of next steps for the Safe Grow Zone. The following Monday, May 27th, the city offices will be closed for Memorial Day, so we'll be meeting that week, Tuesday, May 28th. And just a note that we have some tentative work sessions for discussion of the bike share program and locations and review of the living wage ordinance. And then the first meeting in June is June 3rd, and there will be a presentation on preserving the streetscape character of Tacoma Park's historic neighborhoods. And then finally on Monday, June 10th, we have a public hearing on proposed revisions to Title VI housing, and that is the right to civic inclusion and obligations of landlords. So a number of discussions coming up, and we'll be fleshing out those agendas with some additional items as well. For the record, I have issued a mayoral proclamation, and that is for Bike to Work Day, which is this Friday, May 17th. I just want to point out that Capital Bike Share's regional bike sharing system has reached the milestone of 200 stations within the District of Columbia, Alexandria, and Arlington, and it's poised to expand into Montgomery County and Tacoma Park this fall. Our housing and community development staff coordinate 3 Bike to Work Day pit stops in the city in partnership with local businesses and business associations. And this week, starting today, is National Bike to Work Week, which promotes bicycling as a viable means of transportation to and from work. So I'm declaring Friday as Bike to Work Day and encouraging all residents and local employees to register to Bike to Work. And you can do that by visiting www.biketoworkmetrodc.org. So I'd encourage people to do that. And at this point, we'll go to public comments, and that's for any comments that public wishes to make on anything that's not on our regular voting agenda this evening. So if you're here to, with comments on anything concerning the budget or the agenda item on the charter voting and elections items or the right to vote initiative, if you can hold your comments until those items. And if you have any comments not on those agenda items, now's the time to make those. And if you come to the podium, identify yourself, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. And I see Mr. Lovelace in the back.
Hello, my name is Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate, Tacoma Park, 7620 Maple Avenue. Just want to say it feels good to be back to the meeting tonight. I wasn't even sure if I was going to make it back, because I took a very bad fall the other day. I mean, like 2 weeks ago, I took a very bad fall. Sprained the trapezius muscle in my back. And that can hurt even worse than a break. So I just wanted to let you know, for the last week, over almost a week and a half, I was literally nailed to the bed, couldn't move. And my doctor had to come over to the house to make sure I was all right. So I'm doing okay now with medication, proper treatment. I'm doing fine. And I want to thank everybody for the health care they've given me. I want to thank Doris Thompson for taking good care of me during this, and Keisha Johnson. And also my doctors and other healthcare professionals who have done a lot of work for me over the last 2 weeks to help me make it, help me recover through the dark 2 weeks I was going through. I just want to thank everybody else for their condolences and their concerns about me. But I was also going to mention too that Doris Thompson's the one who did the ponytail, by the way. But I also wanted to mention too that school is letting out pretty soon. And we got to start thinking about how to keep the kids away from the wrong crowds and out of gangs. Because the reason kids want to join gangs is the need to feel welcome and belonged. They want to belong to something like a club. You know, get them into something like scouting, get them into coming to these meetings at night, teach the kids at a young age how to become active, like the Young Activist Club. Show them that they can be useful at their age. They're not just a bunch of kids to be seen and not heard. Those days are gone past. They're showing us it doesn't work. If the kids have got to have an open line of communication with their families and their other people and their teachers to show that if they're having a problem, they need help, they can have someone to turn to rather than the gangs, because the gangs do not care about you kids. They absolutely do not care. They'll just find another sucker when you guys go to jail. They really don't care. And I also want to thank Jerry Cowan for taking me over to the meeting tonight, because I couldn't get any other transportation. Jerry wheeled me over from my house over to here, and I want to thank Jerry very much for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
This is about reserve policy rather than the budget in particular, so I hope this is the right time to do it. If not, I know you'll stop me. I'm Arthur David Olson from Hancock Avenue, and first a warning, I'm neither an economist nor an accountant. After last week's questions about the equipment replacement reserve, I read through the reserve spreadsheet. As an example, there's a line for IT servers B, computing equipment we expect to last for 5 years that's due for replacement in 2017. There's also a line for the next replacement 5 years later in 2022, as well as for 2027 and 2032. The spreadsheet shows contributions toward the cost of all these replacements. In effect, we're helping our children buy the computers they'll be using. This practice spreads the cost of replacements over the largest possible number of years, so it reduces the per-year contribution to the reserve. However, the practice also means that we're saving up for several rounds of replacements, which increases contribution substantially. We could adopt a save-as-you-go approach. We'd continue saving toward the cost of replacing what we now have. Only when replacements were acquired would we start saving towards their replacements, and so on. The cost of replacing equipment would be spread over the lifetime of the equipment. Here are the most important general points. It's true that a save-as-you-go approach reduces the amount we put in reserves, which at first blush should increase the amount our children must put in reserves. However, adopting this approach also eliminates the expectation that our children will help our grandchildren meet their costs. And that eliminated expectation more than makes up for our lowered contributions. As a specific example, if we adopted Save-As-You-Go this year, we'd only contribute toward replacement costs for what we already have. We wouldn't save toward items to be acquired in 2014 and beyond. The total contribution would be about $820,000. That exceeds expected 2014 replacement cost of about $685,000, and also provides about $135,000 towards replacement cost in the high-cost years we know are coming up. The $820,000 is also more than $500,000 less than the figure now budgeted. This would be a significant change in the city's practices and would need careful consideration. But with an annual $500,000 involved, I hope the council will follow through on the intention expressed last week to review reserve budgeting practices. And I'll provide these comments as well as the calculations for the $820,000 figures. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We are going to follow through on those discussions. Would somebody else like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to invite Suzanne Welsh from CPDC to come up and say a few words.
You want to do that now as opposed to when we go to the consent agenda and pull it off? Okay, sure, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Suzanne Welch, and I'm with Community Development Preservation Corporation, and I was here in the fall presenting to our renovation plan for Essex House, and you approved a pilot, and we've entered into a pilot agreement. And what is on the agenda later as a consent agenda is the resolution required by the state, by CDA, this Community Development Administration of the state, as part of the financing. The financing being 4% bonds and rental and housing work money and another gap funding source. So that is a requirement for the financing that the state received the resolution. But I'm here to give you a very brief update. We are scheduled to close. The state put us for a closing at the end of August. Moved it back. We wanted to close in June, but it's now the end of August. And we're looking forward to closing, and very briefly, the renovation includes major energy efficient upgrades, fully sprinklering the building. The building is not currently fully sprinklered. And providing a new water lines. We're going to put solar panels on to help with the efficiency for the hot water. Doing unit upgrades and common area upgrades. We're going to make the building Wi-Fi for the residents so that they have free Wi-Fi available for them. And we're doing upgrades to the community room, putting in a computer lab. We're rebuilding, expanding our resident services there. And I'm happy that Council Member Smith is able to come to a tenant meeting on this Thursday. With the renovation, we are able to expand the affordability of the property by 50%, from 81 units to 125. The renovation will start we close in August, start in September, and run roughly a year. It takes roughly that long to put the sprinkler system in. As part of the renovation, we are going to be putting in, and I mentioned this in my original testimony, we're submetering the building. CDA very much is pushing for energy efficiency, and one of the energy efficiencies is for tenants to take charge of and control of their responsibility for their heat. And we will be submetering the heating, air conditioning, and they'll pay their own electric usage. We will keep gas for cooking, and we will keep hot water. So it's only a partial submetering to them. But we were putting this in process at Park Montgomery, one of our other properties. We educate the tenants, send out information, talk to them several times, and they let them see bills for 2 months before they're responsible. We share their bill for their space. We'll keep paying it, but they see it before we do the transition. And we know we have to submit a request with a formal utility allocations to the City of Tacoma Park. I may be out of time, so maybe I'll stop and let you ask me questions, if you have any.
Thank you for providing that information, and I hope providing it now made it so you didn't have to stick around until much later in the meeting.
I'm a Cavs fan, so I really appreciate it.
We wish them luck.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Wally Malakoff, 8022 Maple Avenue. I just wanted to publicly thank two people in the city, one who is on payroll and one who's not, and that's Ellen Arnold Robbins and Meryl Leffler, who coordinate the book group. And it's a really vital book group. It's a real service. It adds to the quality of life. We've even been graced by Councilmember Daniels Cohen on occasion. We meet monthly, and it's real service, and I don't think it costs the city anything. So it's a real plus, and I'd like to publicly thank them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move along to council comments. Councilmember Daniels Cohen.
You knew it was coming. Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm kind of winging it here tonight. I didn't get to go to Ward 3 today. Ward 3 rocks. But a whole bunch of other folks were there. Big folks and little ones, too. And guess what? The fence that has been up and around all the new equipment was down. This is my little mantra. If you're within a mile of a miracle, take credit for it. I'm not sure who rattled the Maryland National Park and Planning Commission's fence, but someone did, and not only was the fence down, but the property was mowed. Gold stars and huge thank yous, I think, probably go to Susan Ludlow, because I think she's the one who did most of the rattling, but I think Lucas, who's 4 years old, may have done some other rattling as well. You can't say no to a 4-year-old who's talking to you on the phone, really. So thank yous to Maryland National Park and Planning Commission for taking such great care of us. Next up, I'm going to see about getting our Carroll Avenue Opal A. Daniels Memorial Park sign back up. It looked like it got mowed over a couple of months ago. And huge gold stars and special thank yous to the partnership between United Tacoma, Historic Tacoma, and the Tacoma Foundation. What a special, spectacular tour and picnic. This is the kind of results that happen from great relationships and partnerships. There were probably 60-plus people at the park. I got a little show and tell here. I can't give you the whole sign. It goes too long. Well, maybe I can. But these are people that signed. Some of the people that signed, but not all the people that were there. And what they did was, because I couldn't go to the party, they brought the party to me in the pouring down rain, of which it did right in the middle of everything on Saturday, I think, if you recall. And a whole bunch of them came up to the house and sang "You Are My Sunshine," accompanied by Roger Schlegel on the guitar, Jack Cohen on the organ, and everybody singing quite along. It was pretty cool. It made me cry. So I thank them all. I was overwhelmed. But this was the one silly little bit of information I was going to share with everybody down. I had a whole lot of stories about Tacoma Park and that park, because it's a park that my mother spent 25 years. She couldn't get it done on the outside. She got on the commission and made it happen on the commission. 25 years later, it got turned into a park in 1988. And for some reason, I think she knew it happened. But this was a little story I was going to tell. In the 50s, back in the day, that is back in the day, the property called the Franklin was called Winchester Tacoma, and it was built in the 50s. And all of a sudden, these piles of dirt appeared back in that area. Big piles of dirt, 5-6 feet high piles of dirt all over the whole back behind my house. And I believe that it was the taking out. You had to dive into the foundation to make Winchester Tacoma. One thing about Winchester Tacoma was that it was the first, I know this is going to sound strange to most of you, the first elevator apartments anywhere in this area. And as a kid, we would go down there and ride up and down on the elevator, number one. Number two, we also did some slides down the mud in the park. That did not endear us to our parents' hearts, but we still did it. So that was, I'm almost positive, that dirt that was at Winchester Tacoma in a place called the Franklin is up in Opal A. Daniels Memorial Park. And that's it from my side of the mountain. It was a great day. Everybody got their Explore Tacoma bracelet. They brought me up one. It was very sweet of them. And so many people. We had people from Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, of course. Ward 3 rocks, Ward 4, Ward 5, and Ward 6. So it was a really spectacular moment. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would just like to reinforce what Councilmember Daniels Cohen said. The walk on Saturday was great. Joyce and I had a chance to walk through, visit Ward 3, and of course we compared it to Ward 4, but we won't go there now. But it was unfortunate that you weren't able to make it, but your constituents and friends served you well on Saturday. And then I would just like to recognize Ray Nussbaum for opening the Marva Harvest fresh fruits and vegetables stand at the Essex House Apartments on Saturday, just outside of Ward 4 now that it's moved into Ward 5. But I do want everybody who lives along Maple Avenue and Lee Avenue especially to pay attention every Saturday at noon, from noon till 4 p.m. During the summer. There's going to be the produce market at the Essex House, 7777 Maple Avenue, and my constituents who attended and shopped there said that the products were affordable, and so I encourage you to shop at the market, and that way it'll stay around, and we'll have that as another resource in the community. Thank you.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. First, I wanted to thank the Old Tacoma Business Association for their successful Grand Avenue Market on the weekend, which was packed with people. It was really nice to see the junction so busy with people going to the co-op, people going into all the businesses along Carroll, using the food trucks, and, of course, going to the market despite the wind. Some feedback on 410. I've heard positive things from some residents in terms of sidewalk replacement, which has happened very quickly. I think it's less than 2 weeks between the public meeting and today, when some key stretches of sidewalk have been replaced. At the apartment buildings on the north side at the junction of New Hampshire and 410, similarly, the residents are at least some of the residents are pleased with the ADA work that was done there. And I'll just cross my fingers, and, well, I'll do more than cross my fingers, but I hope that we continue to have a very responsive SHA along that stretch. There have been some resident concerns already about cut-through traffic coming up from Sligo Creek Parkway during the temporary closure last Friday, when the end of Sligo Creek Parkway was closed for the pedestrian bridge installation. There were cars cutting up Heather Avenue, going down Elm Avenue at rush hour. Same time, school children are standing at the bus stop, which because of many of those stretches do not have sidewalks, the bus stops are in the street essentially. And similarly, over the weekend, there was an accident on one of the curves of Sligo Creek that took out one of the detour signs. And so I've followed up with SHA already, but it would be helpful to have the city do the same about about replacing that sign stretch. But I do know that the closure, the more permanent closure, begins this coming Friday or around this Friday, and I expect we're going to have some cut-through problems starting this Friday and continuing. And so having a police detail out there, probably morning, and particularly morning, but maybe also evening rush hour may be important. And I believe we may need to consider temporary signs that do something just to reduce the volume of cut-through traffic that may be going through Heather to Elm, because that is not the planned detour route, and it's going to be an issue if it becomes so. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
Continuing the theme about highways, state highways, a reminder that the State Highway Administration is going to be holding a public meeting this coming Wednesday, that's this May 15th, in this room at 6 p.m. The subject matter is going to be the project that is just now starting for rebuilding the bridge on New Hampshire Avenue that crosses Sligo Creek, down at near the intersection of New Hampshire Avenue and Sligo Creek Parkway. This was a project, as many of the people listening know, was originally expected to start around the beginning of February, but has been delayed for some reasons we're not entirely sure of. And hence the community meeting had been delayed, and so we're going to have that meeting. It'll be somewhat slightly different format than was the case for the Route 410 meeting that took place here in this room about 2 weeks ago, and in that I will be handling sort of be the master of ceremonies, if you will, rather than having the officials from the State Highway Administration handling the microphones throughout. But it'll be, I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask questions, and that the meeting is a productive meeting and enlightening to everyone who is in the room. So please make sure that you know to come to this meeting. It is at 6 o'clock. The city tried very hard to get the meeting delayed till at least 7, but we're unable to do so. And if you cannot make the meeting, be aware that the city cable, Tacoma Cable, will be taping the meeting, so it will be telecast on our city channel at a later time. And I think that's probably what that needs to be said at this point on time on that subject. That's the only thing I have.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. I'll start by expressing my appreciation to everyone involved in the Ward 3 walk, which I also enjoyed, and also to OTBA and others involved in the Grant Avenue Market, which Councilmember Mail mentioned. Also, you have one more day until midnight tomorrow to vote for this year's Azalea Awards. Go to tacomafoundation.org. The Azalea Awards will be presented at the tail end of the Celebrate Tacoma Festival this coming Sunday. I believe the time for that is 4 p.m. and the festival starts at noon. Is that correct? In the field behind the community center. So go to tacomafoundation.org if you want to vote.
The festival starts at 1.
It starts at 1. Okay. I wanted to mention something in public that I've been working on, which is Busboys and Poets will be locating on Carroll Street Northwest between Maple and Willow Streets Northwest. That's in the District of Columbia. They have an application in, because they will be serving liquor, to the appropriate office in the District of Columbia that includes hours of license for operations. There's concern about the lateness that they would be permitted to operate. I am working on that, and if anyone is interested, I'd be happy to talk to anyone. I've been engaging mostly with people in my ward who live very close to that site. I've been asked by constituents to seek council direction on something, or I should say council concurrence on something I've been working on personally myself, which is a response to Montgomery College's presentation of their plans to extend in the current footprint the Pavilion 3 building. I have already expressed that I feel that it is money that is going to be poorly spent, putting an addition on a failed building. That failed word is something that they recognize themselves rather than building something new. We have some experience doing that here in Tacoma Park. And I have intended to write a letter, and I would invite my council colleagues to sign on to such a letter once they see it, or I could bring it to the council in the form of a resolution if people would prefer. If appropriate, I would just ask for expressions of opinion now, if that's all right, whether people want to see something brought forward to the council as a resolution.
Let me just add that I was going to schedule the college to come back and have an opportunity for the council to have some additional comment, and trying to schedule that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, that's fine. Then, let's see. Further, working with the proponents of Safe Grow, which is scheduled for next Monday for council discussion of next steps, I worked on redrafting the draft ordinance. Councilmember Mail has been part of this process, and I sent it just today to the city attorney asking for review. And I wanted to ask that the council affirm that the direction to the city attorney to review the current draft.
I think we'll take a look at that and get back to you.
Okay. The time is short, partly because I've been tinkering with it and calling various people to get comment on it and so on. So it would be good to get that direction to the city attorney as soon as possible. One of the criticisms of the draft that was brought before the council before was that it hadn't been reviewed by the city attorney, and that was reflected in the draft. I think that people who commented, members of the public who commented, had expectations for the draft that was before the council that the council members who were involved and the proponents they didn't put it forward with the intention of having anyone think that it was a vote-ready draft or anything like that. So it'd be good to get closer to that. Let's see. That's it. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, given that it is on the agenda soon, I mean, we typically do have city staff or the attorney review almost everything that goes onto the agenda. Isn't that correct?
And staff was also going to come with some recommendations as well.
Staff was going to be speaking with, if they haven't already, with several of the council members, so I'm not sure that there's going to be a particular recommendation by staff.
Okay.
I've had informal discussions with staff back a couple of months ago when the item, whenever that was before the council before, but nothing since then.
Okay. I'll have to follow up on that. I'm sorry.
I am, by the way, also looking for staff and the city attorney's presentation of suggested revisions to the housing code to accommodate concern that constituents raised with me about the pricing of rents in units that have not been occupied for some time. I very much would like to see that before it's brought before the council. And, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I would like to join my colleagues and chime in and say that I attended Marva Harvest opening day at Essex House, so it was a great event. I hope many residents on Maple Avenue continue to visit the fresh produce market. It is located on the northwest corner of the parking lot. I did attend the Ward 3 walk. It was very nice. Even though it rained, a lot of people showed up. It was very good. The Grant Avenue Market was fantastic. I look forward to the next one in June. I couldn't believe the amount of people that showed up to that event. I would like to remind residents of Essex House that there will be a meet and greet this Thursday at 7 p.m. There will be free food, but it's an opportunity for residents to get more information of why their building is now in Ward 5 rather than Ward 4, and any issues that they might be having in the community. I can address them at that time. And finally, I would like to say that the Washington Adventist University and the city have signed a facade improvement agreement, so we will see a different look for 8000 Flower Avenue, the retail strip. Thank you.
I saw that work starting today. I'll add my kudos to the Ward 3 walk. Real nice event, and even though the weather potentially didn't cooperate, it worked out just fine.
Yes.
And I also wanted to let people know that I went to one of the occasional PEPCO Community Advisory Group meetings that I go to early Monday mornings, and we had a real interesting presentation today that I thought would be valuable for the city to have presented to us, and it involved the energy savings mandate that the state made, saying that the utilities have to enroll 40% of their residential customers by 2015 into energy-saving programs. And there was some real good information on those, including the peak energy savings credit. And there was also information about energy audits that I thought would be very helpful that people would want to know about, that are essentially provided free, so that there are a number of really interesting opportunities, and they can make that presentation to us at a city council meeting so people can see it. And I'll be trying to schedule that coming up in the near future. A lot of really good information for residents in single-family houses, residents in multifamily buildings, and businesses and commercial interests as well. So a lot of real good information. And Councilmember Daniels-Cohen, did you have something else?
It's just a quick one. I got to underline, I totally forgot. Celebrate Tacoma 1 to 4 at Ed Wilhelm Field. It's the first time we've done something like that, and then the Azalea Awards. And as Councilmember Grimes said, you have until tomorrow night at midnight to vote. There's some really fabulous people who've been nominated. Some of them, I think, are even in this audience tonight. So make sure you go to, what did he say, tacomafoundation.org, www.tacomafoundation.org, and take a look and go ahead and vote. These are your neighbors and your friends, and they are people who volunteered for a long time, and they deserve to get a look taken at them. So thank you.
And City Manager, have any comments?
As you vote for your Azalea Foundation folks, Margie Saccone and Bomani Jones, city staff, make sure you vote for them. I also just wanted to mention, I sent a text to Councilmember Daniels-Cohen. I guess it was Saturday. Happened to go over and check out the park at Opal Daniels, the new playground, and saw this little girl. She had to be between 3 and 4, running down the path, just as happy as you could possibly be at the thought that the playground was now open to get on, and her mom was yelling, which thing are you going to get on first? I don't know. So it was very nice, and it's nice to see that got done. The only other thing I just want to mention is that we're doing lots of website switching this week. Hopefully there won't be any glitches, but it's a little bit complex, but if you see something that's a problem, please let us know. But this week should be pretty lively. Thanks.
And the beta site is going to go down soon, and it'll just be...
It'll be the real thing.
It'll
yeah.
be totally...
We have to switch hosts and several things, but yeah.
Okay. Any questions for the city manager? Okay, we will move along to our regular voting agenda, and the first item on the agenda is a first reading ordinance adopting the FY 2014 tax rates. Would somebody like to move that ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. This would set the tax rate at 57 cents for the regular budget, and it also sets it at $1.55 for the personal property tax rate and $1.57 for the railroad and public utilities. Would any council members like to make comments on this item? I'll just say that the constant yield rate is, state notified us, would be 60.16 cents. Our rate last year was 57 cents, and the council... 58, sorry. And the council is taking it to 57 cents this year, and that difference is $611,580, and that essentially is the repayment of the taxes that were part of the budget in the current fiscal year that resulted from the county making a last minute, I think it was 2 days before the final second reading on the tax rate, they added that money in at our request for the tax duplication payments. So there was a general amount of discussion about how to deal with that, and the council is dealing with that this year in the tax rate. Councilmember Schultz.
I just wanted to say that among others on the city council, this is reducing the tax rate, but more importantly, reducing the taxes that people pay has been a goal. And this budget, we will be accomplishing that, barring some unforeseen weather disaster or something like that. But in all seriousness, this will be something that's a good response, I think, to pleas from residents that we've been hearing for several years about taxes being reduced.
Any additional council comments? Any public comments on the tax rate for fiscal year 2014? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We now need to vote to convene as the Stormwater Management Board. Would somebody like to move that?
I'll move it.
Anybody second? It's been moved by Councilmember Schultz, seconded by Councilmember Siemens. All those in favor of convening as the Stormwater Management Board, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are now seated as the Stormwater Management Board. The next item on our agenda is a first reading ordinance adopting the FY 2014 Stormwater Management Budget. Would somebody like to move that ordinance?
Move it.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any comments on the stormwater management budget for fiscal year 2014? This sets the base rate for stormwater management fee at $55. That's the same rate as the current year. Okay, is there any public comment?
Light.
Sorry, a late light. Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. One comment, which is just that let's really make sure to get a reporting going out with the bills of how the money's used when we put out our stormwater bills this year. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. We had talked about that. Good point. Okay. Any public comment on the stormwater management budget ordinance for fiscal year 2014? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. The next item is the first reading ordinance adopting the FY 2014 budget. Would somebody like to move the budget? It's been moved by Councilmember Siemens. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Smith. I'll make a couple comments on this, and I'm sure my colleagues have some comments as well. This budget ordinance, I think, keeps responsible levels of reserves, including forward funding of equipment and facilities that continue best practices started here in Tacoma Park in the early 90s. We keep responsible levels of unappropriated reserves so that we have funds available for unforeseen expenses and potentially for some items that we dropped from the budget because of timing issues. We anticipate that the unreserved fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2014 will still be about 17% of fiscal year 14 expenditures, including all capital outlays, and if you take out the capital outlays, it's about 20% of expenditures. We fund the conversion of part-time to full-time positions in city TV while anticipating that the new cable franchise agreements should make available more funding for cable operations in the future if that all works out. We fund Sunday hours for the library and computer center and additional after-school care programs. We also fund additional college prep programs. We removed 3 positions from the speed camera program and put them back in the general fund as we anticipate additional changes to the speed camera program from upcoming state legislative decisions and we still fund the ADA and other sidewalk work. We'll have much lower debt payments than in recent years. We increase funding for the large grant program while recognizing that we need to consider how to make the process for funding those large grants better, which we will soon address. We've expanded the types of grants that we provided, funding types of activities that we haven't considered before. And finally, we increased funding for sustainability initiatives in anticipation of recommendations from our consultant in the near future. So I think that's just a couple of the highlights of the budget for fiscal year 2014. Are there other comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, is there public comment on the first reading ordinance adopting the FY 2014 budget? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The first reading ordinance passes unanimously. We will now move to a second reading resolution amending the Tacoma Park Charter for voting and elections. This is a follow-on to actions that we have taken over the past number of months. Let me just recap where we have been on this. The council has discussed a number of proposals to make voter registration and voting in city elections more accessible for residents and to increase voter turnout. On January 22nd and March 4th, we discussed the initiatives and indicated an interest in moving forward. The charter amendment is required to implement some of the proposals, such as allowing same-day as voter registration, reduction of the voting age to 16, allowing convicted felons to vote once their incarceration is complete, and establishment of early voting and reduction of the residency requirement for voting from 30 days to 21 days. There are a number of individual revisions in the charter that are outlined in the meeting packet on the blue sheet. And at this point, would somebody like to move this at second reading?
Move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Seaman, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Is there council discussion? Councilmember Schultz.
I'd like to propose an amendment to the second reading resolution, and that amendment would be to amend the resolution by saying that the proposed charter changes would be put to a referendum on the November ballot this year for our regular election, and that these various sections, each of them, be placed on the ballot as individual questions, as they probably must be done in that order to be valid under Maryland law, and that will allow the voters of the city of Tacoma Park to vote on these charter changes rather than have the city council adopt these charter changes solely by resolution.
Is there a second? I will second that amendment. I can do that, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that that's an amendment to the charter amendment resolution. That is something else altogether.
Okay, so that would be taken up as a separate piece?
A separate motion that would be to, you wouldn't vote on the charter amendment. If you vote on this, it continues through the process. If you don't want to adopt the charter amendment but instead want a referendum, I think that would be a substitute motion, or you would table this, but I don't think you would amend it by saying it should go to referendum.
So I think the simplest thing would be if you want to, rather than moving it as amendment, you want to make a substitute motion, which would put these questions as a ballot question on the fall ballot.
May I offer that the current resolution, I believe, states that this resolution, if adopted, would take place approximately 50 days and become effective as of July 2nd. And if I don't amend this resolution to state that the effective date will be determined by a vote in November, then I don't have a way of stopping the effectiveness by merely putting up a second and a different motion altogether, something different than the amendment. My concern is to not make this. We can go ahead and adopt this, but I want it not to become effective, because otherwise,
I think the state law says that charter amendments have to follow this format. Is that correct?
Right. I would advise you to, if you to table this, and in that case, if you, we would need to look into it. I would table the charter amendment, move to table it. I don't know. I'm not an attorney. I don't know that you could adopt it and say it would only be effective if the residents approve it at referendum. I don't know that answer, the answer to that. And I wouldn't want you to do something thinking that you're establishing something that's going to happen when it can't happen.
Maybe we should just table Councilmember Schultz's proposal and just move ahead with the charter amendment tonight.
Well, I would advise that what we would want to do, I thought substitute motion would work. So it's saying, okay, different motion on the table. If that motion fails, then we're back to the original.
Yeah.
So I think that's the cleanest way of dealing with it. So a substitute motion to put these questions on the fall city election ballot is in order, if that's what you want to do.
That's fine with me, if we can just have a discussion on this.
Right.
Have the opportunity for the public to make comment as they may on this, and we can vote on it, and then if that does not cause those in favor of putting this on the ballot, we're not going down a path that we're not losing anything by so doing.
Okay.
That's my only, that's my concern, because it's more difficult to deal with a fait accompli than otherwise.
Okay, so the substitute motion is to, instead of having second reading of the charter amendment, to move to put those questions that are on the charter amendment as a referendum question, as a series of referendum questions on the fall city election.
Right, and if you were to do that, you would have to start the process over again after the election, because any legislation introduced during this term of council expires at the end of the council's term.
Right, and I believe by law in Maryland, the questions that we can put on our ballot are advisory only.
Right, right.
So they are not. That doesn't settle it. We would still have to enact after that.
Right.
So if I understand this correctly, then if we proceed with this substitute resolution, then that's something that would be on the ballot, and it would effectively kill the question, because and a new council would have to bring it up after the election, should they choose to do that.
I'd like to think about this a little bit. The truth of the matter is, there's that period between your term doesn't end until the new council is sworn in. So
there's like a week or two
theory,
in there.
There is a little time between the election and the swearing in of the new council.
But would that be sufficient time for a charter amendment at that point?
Well, I'm saying that would be the second reading.
Right.
See?
Yes, so second reading could take place after the election while this council is still seated. They
But-
would continue this process.
But I would like to, if you're going in this direction, I'd propose that we take a little break and let's explore what's happening.
Well,
before
why don't, before we do that, why don't we find out if there's support for this? If there isn't,
Then it
then
doesn't matter.
we don't need to go there, okay? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Is there council discussion? Councilmember Schultz.
Yes, I think that altering the election rules in the charter, our charter being our foundational document for this city, and it is altering the election rules represents a substantive change in the charter, and it goes to the very core of our democratic process as to how elections are conducted and who gets to vote, who's eligible to vote and who is not, and that sort of thing. And I think that that's something that needs to be given to the voters to make a decision on, to the registered voters, in other words, those who are qualified to vote. They need to be able to have the opportunity to decide on the merits of each of these proposed changes in the charter. Now, were these minor changes to the charter, or if these were something that was mandated by state or federal law that we had to comply with, then of course that we wouldn't be a consideration. But because it's dealing with elections, I think this is something that begs to be put on the ballot. Irrespective, this has nothing to do with my particular position or anybody's particular position on each of the questions that is they're cast as sections here on this agenda item, the merits of them. Were I to say that each of them is great, and I support all of them, which I'm not saying, I still think it should be on the ballot. I would remind my colleagues and all of you who are listening is that there's just 7 of us up here regularly pass resolutions and ordinances that modify the code. But modifying the charter is something different. The charter that we have today is something that has evolved over scores and scores of years, and it's not something to be tampered with lightly. And I just am very uncomfortable with the idea of 7 people having come up with this idea, of these various ideas for changes, would endow themselves with the authority to make these kind of changes to the charter without having consultation or the input of the citizens at large. We sit up here, we who sit up here aren't smarter than our constituents. The reason we are up here is simply because we wanted to make the effort to spend our time, hours and days, in this position, and we're willing to get out and campaign and do the work necessary to get elected. We certainly are not up here because of the money involved, as everybody knows. So here we are, but I don't think that gives us automatically doesn't make us smarter than the rest of you guys. I've received a number of emails, I know that petitions are being circulated that wish to bring this to referendum, but there's only so many days to do that. I think, according to Jesse Carpenter, it's until June 22nd that that would be the time allocated for petitions to be signed. Those petitions have to be signed by 20% of the registered voters in the city. There's approximately 11,000 registered voters in the city, so you're talking to about approximately 2,200 valid signatures that would need to be gathered in a period of about 5 weeks. I think that's an arduous thing to expect residents to do. Not saying it can't be done, but that's what the charter requires, 20%. We can say, well, that's way too much, but we're not in the position of changing the charter at this point on that subject. So I think that to be fair to everybody, the easiest thing to do is to allow this to be put on the ballot, and I suspect that that certain of these things will easily pass, and other ones, who knows? But that's not the point as to what we suspect or what we think. It's not the point of how ardently those of us feel individually about getting certain of these things approved and into the charter by the next election. I know that some of us on the council feel that it's really, really important to make these changes before the next election. I say it may be important, but it's not that important. It's not that urgent that we should deprive residents of the opportunity to vote on this in a referendum. There is the irony that's been pointed out by others to me that here we are adopting charter changes that will be trying to encourage participation in election. That's the underlying philosophy behind these changes. And if we want to get people out, wouldn't it be nice to have this on the election ballot so that people could vote on it, rather than sort of saying that, well, we're going to make these changes, but we're not going to let you have a role in saying that this is what the election changes should be. So that's the reason why I am proposing the substitute motion.
And I'll just make a quick comment as the seconder. I have, as we have discussed these various pieces that are resulting in this proposed charter change, I have always said I thought that putting a question on the ballot was a good idea, and partly that goes back to the history of how the city added non-citizen voting in the 80s. That was a ballot question, and the voters concurred, and I think it makes much more valid these proposed changes and has the community much more involved in making that decision. Council Member Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not in agreement with Councilmember Schultz. I think first to start off with, Tacoma Park is a representative democracy. We're elected here on this council to represent the interests of our constituents in the city. I have nearly 3,000 people who I represent here on the council, and I get their advice frequently and ongoing through all of these processes. I agree that this is an important decision that we're making, but I think that many of the decisions that we make are extremely important, and I think it would move towards chaos should we seek the advice of our constituents through referendums. So I strongly encourage my colleagues to make the tough decisions that we're getting the big bucks for, and the people we represent certainly let us know throughout whether we're doing what they wish or not, and I think the same case will be true this time. Thank you.
Councilmember Mayle.
Thank you. I don't support this proposal, but I just thought it would be useful to provide a historical reference. In January of 1989, the council appointed a task force to look at the charter. That task force was 3 council members and 4 members of the public. That task force, the recommendations and the subsequent action of the council, is responsible for, in large part, the charter we see before us. It established a strong city manager form of government, creating the city manager position, putting all department head positions underneath the city manager. It created moved from a 6 to a 7-member council. It made many other sweeping changes to the way the city is governed and affirmed what was already a referendum process, the route to a referendum being what we've talked about already tonight. And citizens may petition, 20% of residents may petition. That process of dramatically changing our charter by the very people who created this charter we're working with now, they did not go through referendum. Even though if you look at the minutes of the council meetings, which seem to generally reflect participation from the public and council members in terms of who's attending, who's speaking, there was disagreement among the public about the scope of what council was doing, and there was disagreement on the council with regard to that. So the precedent from the very people who created our charter was that there would be things reserved for council to do, and there is a process for a referendum. I think on an issue like this, it's, as Councilmember Seaman says, something that we're empowered to do by the charter, and I look forward to us taking a vote on the substance of these issues. Thank you.
Any further council comment? Okay, we'll take public comment on this substitute motion.
Hi, good evening. I'm Elizabeth Wallace. I only heard about the voting rights conversation last Wednesday, so I'm sorry I missed the previous discussions, but I'm here now. So if we want to join the fewer than a dozen countries around the world whose voting age is 16, perhaps we should do one or both of two things. One, ask to learn from them regarding their critical outreach and education of students and young adults to perform their civic duty. What did they do to engage the children beyond just lowering the age? And or work with the News Literacy Project. I just heard about it on NPR today. The News Literacy Project is a response to the growing challenge of assuring that America's young people get the information they need to become well-informed citizens and voters in the 21st century. According to journalists from the New Literacy Project, students have a tendency to believe that all news is created equal. Younger children think all news is true because it's on the internet. High school students believe that it's equal in a different way, that it's all equally driven by bias, commercial, personal, political, or other. Their sources are Facebook, YouTube, blogs, which are sometimes driven by interests which are not that evident, viral emails, and some newspaper and TV. The journalists focus on how to distinguish credible information from opinion, spin, rumor, advertising, and propaganda. They also discuss why news matters to young people and what the First Amendment and a free media mean in a democracy. Tapping into the passion journalists feel for their craft, the project brings active and retired journalists into middle schools and high schools. They've done it at Walt Whitman and Bethesda, as well as schools in New York and Chicago. They encourage students to seek verified information on any medium or platform. Journalists are joining forces with teachers to do so through a core curriculum, their own compelling stories, hands-on exercises, videos, and the use of digital media. The journalists are from NPR, New York Times, Washington Post, among many other credible sources. The journalists are matched by the project staff with social studies, history, and English teachers. Print, broadcast, and online reporters and editors, producers and photographers are visiting classrooms or participating in video conferences with students through Skype. So finally, I'd like to say that anything we choose to do should be ongoing and sustainable, since we can count on Tacoma Park to produce 16-year-olds every year. And perhaps we could ask the News Literacy Project to work with our adults, too, myself included. So, by the way, most of what I read is from their website, so I'm giving them credit for it. And they often suggested the kids to go to factcheck.org, which I did, and I Googled Tacoma Park, and we came up. So regarding the immigration sanctuary law. So if you want to fact check that, then go to factcheck.org. Thank you.
Thanks. And a reminder that the question on the floor at the moment is, do we put this on the ballot in the fall, or do we, and if not, then we'll go back to the charter change amendment, the charter change resolution. So what we're discussing now is, do we put it on the ballot in the fall?
Hi, Chantal Warzalo, Ward 1. I thought I'd call up the Tacoma Park Charter while you all were talking, and I did notice that any petition that citizens would put forward actually need to be signed by those who are eligible to vote in the elections. Therefore, what you're proposing to do is put on the ballot something that those who would be affected by the decision cannot vote on. In other words, all of those who are subject to the amendment, whether it be convicted felons who have served their time, or 16 and 17-year-olds, et cetera. So it strikes me that the proposed process would not actually fairly represent both those who are the subject of the proposed charter amendment, as well as those who currently have the right to vote. And so therefore, as someone who currently has the right to vote in Tacoma Park, I actually believe that having our representatives talk to both those who can currently vote and those who are part of the affected populations, that's actually a more fair process, since those who can't currently vote can participate in that process. As, for example, the very intelligent Tacoma Park high schoolers who did come and present their views about a month ago were able to do. I'd also note, just for the benefit of those who think that the Health Literacy Project is a good thing, it has in fact been involved in Blair High School, and I believe they actually just finished up working with students at Blair High School. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Lovelace.
I would like to see you people vote on this tonight, because I don't think it's good to wait on this as long as to the elections, because I want to see the young people get a chance to vote their first time on the election day. I also want to see convicted felons allowed to vote. Their punishment is done, and we must recognize that. We can't just keep carrying on their punishment. We got to stand up like the brave people Tacoma Park is, and not just bow down because of uneasiness or fear. Because we can always reverse this if we have to. But I think really what we should do is we should try it. We should get up there and vote on it today. And remember, a lot of our brothers and sisters' rights to vote depend on this. And I think we should to take this very seriously. You know, because I don't like to see people when they have to come out of prison and they're told their sentence is not over yet because they cannot vote. They're still being disenfranchised even after their punishment is done. That has to stop now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Catherine Tunis, and I am here to directly speak in support of the amendment, the substitute amendment, to put these questions to a resolution. I agree that these are much too big a question to have only 7 people make the decision. There has been a lot of opposition to the charter amendment being voted on by council, and whether people support it or don't support it, people generally agree that this is a large enough question that it should be going to a referendum. I am disturbed to hear a council member speak that if it goes to referendum and it is not enacted, that he would like to see council then vote on it as a second reading and put it in as a lame duck council. I think that's, I'm really disturbed to hear that. I also don't think that those affected cannot vote on it, because every one of the current voters would be affected by this charter amendment, because they're reasoned, educated, intelligent, long-term resident vote would be diluted by somebody who's lived here for 21 days or read about something on Twitter and decided to go down and register and vote that same day. I think that that cheapens everybody's vote. So I strongly, strongly urge. I also want to say that it's not just me to speak here. I know that there are at least 30 people who have signed a petition to put this to referendum so far. There has been numerous messages on email, which I know, Seth, I know you've seen a lot of them from upstanding and strong leaders, community leaders, such as Roger Slagle and former Mayor Ed Sharp, Colleen Clay, former council member Colleen Clay, and even people who are new to the issue say, let the people decide. So I hope you will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Camille Kirsch. I'm one of the people who would benefit from the proposal to lower the voting age to 16 years old. And I'm speaking now against the proposal not to vote on the charter amendments today. With all due respect to Councilmember Schultz, I believe that the people of Tacoma Park have had an opportunity to make their voices heard on this issue, and that if the people of Tacoma Park would like these issues to be on the ballot, our current petition process is sufficient for that need. I previously attended a meeting on this issue, on these charter amendments, and spoke along with other members from my high school who live in Tacoma Park. I attend Montgomery Blair High School. I would also just like to mention for a second the previous speaker's comments. While I'm sure she meant all due respect, I feel slightly insulted by the implication that my input would cheapen the votes of people who are currently enfranchised to vote in Tacoma Park. Also, the comments on teenagers' reliance on social media as a news source, while they may be true of some teens, are certainly not applicable to everyone, and stereotypes such as that should be avoided in a fair and unbiased political process. So thank you for hearing my opinions, and thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Stewart. I was lucky enough to be here when you all voted on this the first time, and what struck me was a number of council members who said that when they first heard about these changes to the charter, I think one of you mentioned that you thought it was stupid, that these changes were actually stupid, but that over the last few months and in hearing the evidence from other countries and listening to students like the one who just spoke and thinking about it, you changed your minds and came to the decision that this was actually, all of these resolutions, all these movements were a good one for our city. And I would just say that that's why you all are voted, that's why you all sit here, because maybe you aren't getting the big bucks to do it, but you have the time that the rest of us do not. I unfortunately don't have the time to sit and read all the studies Tim has put up on his website, but I trust that all of you will take the time and contemplate carefully these measures, and that is why I think you sit here. And so I would I'm asking you not to move this motion and to change the vote, to change the charter for these voting resolutions. And I would also just say that my fear, if you don't take this responsibility that I think all of you have, is that comments that have been made in this chamber and that have been made tonight regarding young people, regarding convicted felons and others, will be made again out of ignorance. The idea that people who vote now are educated, intelligent, and just by the fact that they have the vote, and somebody who doesn't because they're young or a convicted felon, I think is awful to hear, quite frankly. And I fear that that is the kind of debate that we would have in the city if we move forward without you all taking the responsibility who have carefully looked at and thought about this issue. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I think we can vote on this substitute motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And all those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Okay, I take that as a 5-2 vote against the substitute motion, therefore the motion fails. Therefore, the original motion is back on the floor, and that's what we will discuss. Who would like to comment? Well, I will say that I was in favor of the substitute motion, but since that did not carry, I will be voting in favor of the second reading charter amendment resolution. I was one of the council members who originally wasn't convinced that some of these changes were a good idea. I did not use the word stupid, but I did feel that some of them were. You're going to take credit for that one. I was convinced over time in listening to the various discussions we had and listening to the testimony that these are good changes. And I think the main thing about 16 and 17-year-old voting is I was convinced by the argument that people who that people do establish lifelong voting patterns early, and that the best place to establish those patterns is while they're still at home before they've gone off to college or to new work, and that they can establish those in the community that they grew. There's a much higher chance that they will do it in the community that they have grown up in the context of living with their family while still in high school. And I think that will encourage many more people to establish lifelong voting patterns and participate in elections. And I think that's the overall goal of these charter amendments, and I will be voting in favor. Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Rather than repeat the reasons why I will vote in favor of this charter change, which does encompass, as we know, more than just voting for 16 and 17-year-olds, I'll focus on 2 points. One is that I want to assure everyone that I have heard as many voices as have spoken within my hearing. I've attempted to solicit views from my constituents and others in the city, and the dynamic of exchange of views has been very important in helping me determine what my position is going to be. I have found that on this issue there has been, in my opinion, sufficient discussion, expression of views, to the point where some of them do get repetitious, but that's part of the process, to help me understand what the right thing to do is. Secondly, I have an observation that many of us in the community on the two sides of this issue seem to be talking past one another with different arguments that don't meet up head to head. On the one hand, those of us who favor extending the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds have the same motivation we have in extending the vote to on parole and on probation felons, a motivation of inclusion. We believe that members of society in whom we place our trust will by and large live up to the trust we place in them. And we're ready to perhaps admit a few clunkers in the process of admitting a lot more a very high proportion of people who will be engaged and will live up to our expectations. On the other hand, people who are against this generally have focused on risk. They have focused on the supposed immaturity of 16 and 17-year-olds when it comes to making voting decisions. They've said that 16 and 17-year-olds will be influenced by their parents, that they will become proxy for their parents' votes. I just don't buy it, and I don't buy that we should be motivated by fear of a downside that, in my estimation, is not all that great. I go over for myself what the worst-case scenarios here could be in extending the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds. I just don't come up with anything very serious. So, to me, the politics of inclusion, of creating opportunity for getting people involved in society, as Mayor Williams noted, creating lifelong patterns of voting at higher rates, those opportunities just overweigh any theoretical risks that are involved here. So I do thank, once again, everyone for the views that have been expressed in the council meetings, in email, in private discussions. They've helped me determine how I'm going to vote here, and it's been a great process. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
I've been very impressed all through these debates on this resolution by what people have said who've come up to the podium, most particularly the young people. I'm just stand in admiration of your courage to come up here at your age and to be as articulate as you are. But I'm concerned not about your vote. Obviously, you've probably got more conscientious approaches to voting than a lot of the adults in the city who are registered. But I am concerned, though, that we're rejecting a referendum process by doing this. And it does sound to me as though those who have voted against putting this on the referendum are partly doing so because they're worried of what might happen if it goes to the general vote. And that bothers me. I don't think we should be worried about that. If these things have true merit, allowing ex-felons who have not completed their probation to vote, allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, if they're that concerned that a referendum might not allow the approval of it, then I wonder why we're doing this. So I would think that a referendum would clear the air and allow all of us to say, it wasn't just the city council that made these changes. The citizens of the city voted, and they supported all of these changes. And so that should make us all stand up and be that more convinced that it was, in fact, the right thing to do. So, but because of that, I'm going to vote against this resolution for that reason alone. And I do think that means that, because I've talked to so many people who've expressed dismay and unhappiness with the idea of young people voting, that I have an obligation to represent their interests here, just as my other council members feel that they represent people who support this. It simply means that when it's going to pass here in a minute, that those who feel that this stuff needs to be put on the referendum will have their work cut out for them. If they can gather the signatures, then God bless them, and it'll be on the referendum. If they can't, well, then that is also further proof that this is not what the will of the people is, and that the will of the people is, in fact, that these charter changes be carried through immediately. So we live with the results. Thank you.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. I thank all my colleagues for their comments on this and their hard work on this, and it has been a long process. doing work on these issues. And the next agenda item that we're talking about, the resolution, is another big part of this. In fact, at least from my perspective, that's where it started. It started with trying to look at a whole package of changes that the city could make, none of which are perfect or complete by themselves, just as these are not, that make it a little easier for everyone to express a view in the city, that open the doors of our city to more people. These three changes are all things that I've had a chance to learn more about. And as one of the members of the public said, to learn about youth brain development and the latest advances in youth brain development, to learn about what's going on in other countries, to learn about patterns of voting, even in the United States, among the youngest of the people who are currently enfranchised in the United States, that 18-year-olds turn out in relatively high numbers, 19 and 20 and 21 and 25-year-olds turn out in relatively low numbers. To do a lot of background research, to see these proposals evolve as we get feedback from the community, as we get feedback from experts, as we get feedback from council members, city staff, the city attorney. To me, each of these three changes is important. With the first, the change that allows us to have people register the very day, register and vote the very day of the election. We have people who are not able to vote today in our city or every election in our city because they somehow just didn't know about the registration limits, or they didn't find out about it in enough time. They've still met with candidates. Maybe they've attended forums. They could read newsletter stories, but they missed that chance. And this change creates the possibility that those people can vote with us. It may only be a small number of people in every election. They may tend to be newer residents rather than older residents, but they're still residents. They're still part of our community. And it's a wonderful thing that we'll be able to add them to the rolls of people who can vote this November and every November after that, and any special election as well. The issue of felon voting is another important change, and we have talked about restoring full voting rights for people with felony convictions, including people still incarcerated. This change, the change we have before us to allow voting rights for felons who have served their time and are now on parole, is a great step in the right direction. And I would be very proud of our action in Maryland if we took this step and repeated what people in other places have done. And on the third issue, the issue of 16 and 17-year-olds in Tacoma Park being able to vote, that too is a very important change to me. And to many people in the community who have spoken about it at these meetings, who speak about it in one-on-one or email or phone calls or at the Grant Avenue Market. We have many 16 and 17-year-olds in our community who care deeply about this place, who have spent many, many years living here, who are deeply engaged in state, in federal politics and policies, who work all the time to better this community and our communities in the country, and frankly even around the world. Those 16 and 17-year-olds know hard choices. They work. They face choices about where to go to college. They pay taxes. They benefit from our services. They benefit from our police force, our recreation programs, our housing programs. Many of them live in housing that is partly made more affordable by city policies. This change to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote would be a step toward bringing them into the process of being included in the community in a way that frankly, they can't be anywhere else in the United States, in a way that I think helps prepare them for the next steps, toward voting as 17-year-olds who will be 18 at a general election, toward voting in primaries, toward voting in national elections. And it's to me, I've just become more and more convinced by the evidence we've been able to accumulate from people in the community, as well as from literature that we've received from around the world, that this is a great step forward. And so I'm looking forward to the vote tonight, and looking forward to seeing what we do. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I think this is a moment for leadership for the council. Our community, Tacoma Park, is known for being leaders in different initiatives, whether it's the nuclear-free zone, whether it's sustainability. But right now, the rest of the state and even the country are not where we are when it comes to voting rights. And by passing this legislation, we will once again show that we are leaders in rights that are very important to various segments of the country, or various segments of our population. So I am going to support these proposals. I think it is very important for the right for recently released felons to once again have their rights of franchisement given back to them. There are 5.8 million people in this country that do not have that right, or they do not get that right back in some situations ever, and others it's not returned to them until they finish parole. But I think as a community we need to show that we want these people to be once again part of our community, 100%. Not we're going to have them do these requirements that if they finish parole or if they finish maintaining some type of in-house incarceration, that then they once again will get their rights back. But I think that this vote is very important for a signal, not just for Tacoma Park, but for the state and the country. Voting rights is under attack in this country. You know, Title V, as part of the Voting Rights Act, is going to be decided by the Supreme Court. And that means that there might be a number of people in different states that might see that their voting rights will be diminished. So I call on my colleagues to support these proposals, and I thank you very much.
Councilmember Schultz, you have an additional comment.
In light of the fact that this is going to be approved, I'll say something here that I said at the first reading, and that is that I think that giving the right to young people who are age 16 and 17 to vote, it doesn't do justice to what we're trying to achieve here. I think that will make those people and many adults pleased that they have this opportunity, but I think if we're going to put some substance behind this, since this is apparently what's going to be becoming part of our charter, we have an obligation to help young people understand what is going on in the city. Just handing them the vote and then sort of saying, well, we did our job, now we can walk around, parade around and say how liberal, how progressive we are, is not enough. As I think we have the need to help educate young people, and I think that the city council need to be very proactive in getting out into the community, into classrooms, and doing whatever we can to create and advance programs that will help inspire kids, if you will, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. My mother used to call me a kid until the day she died. To help them understand how the city works, what it's like to work for the city, what it's like to be in public service, what it's like to be to sit up here at the dais, how things happen, how things get done, why things don't get done at the municipal level. Because I believe if you can understand things at the municipal level about government, that will give you a much finer appreciation than anything you're ever going to learn in civics about how Congress works and doesn't work. Because this is really where democracy starts, and it started this way back before the Declaration of Independence, and it continues. And I think the comments by Elizabeth Wallace earlier about this program being tried by journalists throughout the United States is something that we ought to look at trying to adopt here. I just think that this handing this vote and amending our charter is a sort of a quickie fix to make people feel good. I'm hopeful that it'll inspire lots of young people to come out and vote, but I'm worried that after the initial enthusiasm, and golly gee, I got to walk into a voting booth and vote, that the novelty will wear off, and we'll be pretty much back where we started from unless we do something that would really help teenagers, kids 16, 17, maybe even 15 and 14 and down to 12 to learn about these things in a way that's just not something that is that you would learn in a normal government class in high school, because that's not always the most stimulating environment for learning about things. I'd be interested in hearing ideas about how we can do this. One of the ideas that I talked about a month ago, whenever this thing was on first reading, was to organize, have a statutory committee in the city comprised just of young people who can deliberate on issues amongst themselves, unfiltered by adults who are trying to tell them how they should think, and all that sort of thing, where they can learn and literally get involved in the workings of the city. There probably are better ideas than that, but that's the point is that let's just not stop here. If we're going to do this, let's do something that will really impress people, not just sort of saying, oh, well, we planted a flag. Now you young people who are 16 and 17, you vote, and if you don't, well, that's too bad, and if you do, well, that'll be fine. But we're not going to really pay much attention to it. I don't want that to happen. Let's go the whole 9 yards. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Any additional council comment? Any public comment on this resolution, second reading resolution, amending the Tacoma Park Charter? Mr. Lovelace.
Yes, my name's Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park. This is one of the main reasons I came out tonight, even though I'm in a lot of pain. I still came out tonight to support this resolution. I'd love to see, we've been too long saying that, 16-year-olds are too stupid to vote, or they're too young to vote. As long as we keep that attitude up, it's going to go on forever. And also, I'm glad to see us giving the right to convicted felons a right to vote, because once their punishment is up, we're not going to say you still can't vote, because the judge may have said 32 years or whatever number of years, but he did not add at the end of it, you can never vote again. He didn't put that on his sentence. And I don't think anyone ever would. I would like to see them given their constitutional rights back, make them equal like the rest of us are. We all make mistakes in life. They just got caught. And I'd like to see us respect their right to vote, do everything we can to get it. And also, I want us to be aware of the Supreme Court's action that's coming up on Title V on the Voting Rights Act. We all got to remember this. Tacoma Park is leading the way again. We've got to do everything we can to preserve our right to vote. That's one of my main concerns when I come to these meetings tonight, is getting people to register to vote. And I'd like to be able to see 16-year-olds register to vote. And I'd also like to see convicted felons register to vote and other people register to vote. I don't want to see anyone have their rights trampled on, especially in Tacoma Park. I don't want to see that happen anywhere. And I support this amendment. Resoundingly, I support this amendment. This resolution. I support this resolution resoundingly. I want people's right to vote. 16-year-olds, I should think, have a right to vote, because people are different than they were 40 years ago. They're more learned now, the internet, instant communications and stuff, communication to the speed of light. We have done that, and our kids are learning a lot faster than we did when we were kids. Remember that. And also remember, convicted felons have a right to vote just like I do. So please, give us the right to vote. Give everybody the right to vote. And remember, think about what your Supreme Court is doing, and we may have to go down to demonstrate at the Supreme Court. If we do, let me know. I'd love to join in on that because people's right to vote is one of my main concerns. Thank you very much. And we vote on this, vote yes on this, please. I'm in a lot of pain, and I came out anyway because this was on the agenda. And that's very important to me. People's right to vote is very, very important to me. Thank you very much. I hope it's important to you people just like it is to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Other people who wish to comment on this resolution? Okay, seeing none, this is a second reading resolution requiring a roll call vote. Will the clerk please call a roll?
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz?
Nay.
Councilmember Mail?
Aye.
Councilmember Grimes?
Aye.
Councilmember Daniels Cohen?
Aye.
Mayor Williams?
Aye. So that passes 6-1. We will now take a short break and come back for the remaining agenda items. The next item on our agenda is a resolution affirming the right to vote, establishing a task force on voting, and supporting a constitutional amendment granting an individual right to vote. Would somebody like to move this resolution?
Yes, I'll move it. Second.
It's moved by Councilmember Mayle, seconded by Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember Mayle, would you like to walk us through this?
Sure, I'd be happy to. This follows from the discussion we just had about 3 charter changes. This resolution embodies a whole set of ideas around how do we continue to make our voting process better. What are the values that we really care about when it comes to elections and participation in democracy in Tacoma Park and nationally. The body of this is partly about issues such as Councilmember Smith raised, issues like the Voting Rights Act, and making sure that that Americans everywhere have a right to vote, have a right to participate. It goes through a number of recommendations or statements that we would be making to members of Congress, members in the State House, regarding things like our instant runoff voting and advocating for instant runoff voting at the state level, encouraging a congressional or a constitutional amendment establishing a right to vote. The Supreme Court has opined on this issue and concluded that Americans don't have a right to vote in the Constitution. In fact, there was a proposal introduced just today by Congressman Keith Ellison from Minnesota proposing just that, proposing a constitutional amendment that would create a very clear right to vote, which would just create protections that we don't currently have, that everyone in America doesn't currently have. The second big piece of this is focused on getting better, is focused on the creation of a task force that would be separate from but also include representation from our Board of Elections. And that task force would be appointed by council and then work over the course of roughly the next year to evaluate some of the changes that we just made, and I think there are some amendments we could make in this to strengthen how much the task force would focus on issues like the education that members of the public had just raised around the issues, the charter change issues, that would look at issues like the access to apartment buildings and participation by renters that we've talked about in earlier meetings, and would make recommendations to us on additional changes in regulation or code or policy and practice that we would want to make, potentially other changes that are significant that we have not thought of as yet. But the idea behind this is just essentially to take a pause, to get participation from people in the community, and really think about how we can make our elections better and get more participation. The task force would work through June 30th, 2014, and come back to us with their recommendations, which is roughly a year from now. I think I will stop there because that covers, I think, the broad aspects of the resolution.
Is there something that you wanted to propose as a kind of a friendly amendment to address anything that we might want to add to this, given the earlier discussion this evening?
The clerk had earlier suggested some language that I think I don't have right in front of me, but I'd want to bring that back.
I could locate that while
Okay.
you're talking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Grimes.
I would like to propose an amendment, two amendments to this resolution. One is under Section 2 that the task force shall consist of up to 11 members. Odd numbers are good in voting cases. And then the second is that we add a clause, possibly between 4 and 5, that would say the council shall aim to appoint at least 2 youth members aged 21 or less on the date of appointment. That would need a second, I think.
Can you go?
Section
point out
2
those
on
two
page
again.
2 of 4. Section 2 on page 2 of 4. Paragraph 2 under Section 2. The task force shall consist of up to 11 members appointed by the City Council instead of 10. Then the second proposed amendment is a new subsection, possibly between 4 and 5. The council shall aim to appoint at least 2 youth members aged 21 or less on the date of appointment.
Okay.
I'll just explain. I don't think it needs a lot of explanation. The aim in appointing youth members is to help with outreach to younger people. I think age 21 is a suitable one there. I think we'd be more likely to get younger than 21, given that youth who are aged roughly 18 to 21 are very frequently in college and not in Tacoma Park. And I am suggesting aim to appoint in order not to lock us into that.
Okay. And do the mover and seconder want to take those as friendly amendments?
Happy to. Yes.
Okay. Those are friendly amendments. Those are incorporated in the in the resolution. Further discussion on the resolution? Okay. Is there any public comment on this resolution? Mr. Lovelace.
Hello, my name is Pat Lovelace again, your official peace delegate. I want to tell you I support this amendment. This resolution. I support it. I want to see Tacoma Park help the whole country preserve our right to vote, because as we noticed in the Supreme Court, they may be attacking Title V in the Voting Rights Act. And I want to do everything we can to preserve our right to vote in Tacoma Park and around the country. I know we can do it. As a city, we owe it to our people to do it. And as Americans, we owe it to our country to do it. So please support this. Remember, there's a lot of people out there, they try to ruin their right to vote by having these weird identifications and stuff to show up and vote. And they had to have all this special identification cards, and it takes a lot of people on fixed incomes don't have the ability to get those cards all real quick. And a lot of people who are handicapped and may not be able to get a ride to get to the all the way out to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get that so-called card and wait in line. So why make it more difficult for people's right to vote? We have to stand up against that. We have to also do everything we can to preserve Section 5 in the Voting Rights Act, and do everything we can to educate our youth here in the Tacoma Park. Now that we're going to be having 16-year-olds vote, we got to educate them about the importance of it, because I think they're going to start voting at a young age, and I think they're going to stick with it. If we start them off on the right foot, they'll stick with it. We've got too much voter apathy going on now. I think we can help battle it by doing this. So please, do everything we can to preserve our right to vote, not just here, but around the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this resolution?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Wallace. I think it's a great idea to have more youth members on the task force. I wasn't clear whether it would be 21 down to what age, down to whatever.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It probably should be age 16 to 21 at the time, at the date of appointment.
Okay. But I'm a student again, and at Montgomery College, because it's free when you're 60. And I think it would be good to possibly go to like Lucy Vitaliti, who's in charge of volunteerism there, to recruit maybe a student who's a Tacoma Park resident and also fits in the age range that's at Montgomery College, so you get that aspect, and or somebody who's a Tacoma Park resident and a student at University of Maryland. They can get student service learning hours, maybe credit for doing it. So I think it would be a win-win in more than one way. Thanks.
Thanks for those suggestions. Other comments?
Rob Ritchie, over on Jackson Avenue, and I think this is a terrific step and makes a lot of sense and really goes well with the charter change that just has been approved as an implementation measure in a sense, because as Councilmember Schultz was saying that a lot of this is going to be in the implementation for making these changes work. You can have a lot of good laws that if other things don't happen, turnout is really low. I just wanted to share the fact that in Texas on Saturday they had Saturday voting, which is a good thing, weekend voting. They had early voting in these Texas cities that just voted this past week, and more than 93% of registered voters did not vote in the mayoral election in Amarillo, even though it was contested, and more than 93% of registered voters did not vote in city council elections in San Antonio. There's something going on with low turnout. We've had regularly, more than 80% of our registered voters not participate in our city elections. And I think that, as Councilor Smith was saying, we are in a point where voting rights is under attack, and I think that part of what that means in response is to stand up for using the right to vote as well as protecting the right to vote. And I think I suspect a lot of good ideas will come out of the process, just as we have seen come out of your debates these last few months, such as the one you're going to talk about later with the access to apartment buildings. And there's other ideas out there, and I think that getting them out there more will be good for our community. So I'm really strongly supportive of this.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Councilmember Schultz, you have another comment?
Right. Couple thoughts. I would hope that this task force would be able to survey, literally speak to people in the city who don't vote, and to survey them in a intelligent manner to find out why they don't vote, what would it take to get them to vote, to sort of see if they can't do a certain amount of diagnosis to help us figure out if there's what else we may be able to do, so that so that we can come back with some data that we can actually sink our teeth into with regard to the causes of low voter participation, so we're just not left to speculate among ourselves or to sort of say, well, this is just the way it is kind of stuff, or that's, there's a lot of theories out there, but this would be interesting to find out why people in our city choose not to vote. The other thing I wanted to suggest is maybe language that could be in here, and I'm not making this as an amendment because I just want to ask more of a question, that would address some of the ideas that I was talking about a minute ago on the last resolution, that the task force could be charged as well with the task of figuring out the best way in which we can encourage young people, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, to participate, not just going to the polls, but to actually get them more involved in showing up here and doing some. I don't want to go and rehash everything I've said, but to get them more connected to the process of local government. One of the people that spoke, the young lady that came to the podium earlier, told me that at Blair there is a standard course taken into 10th grade on government, and that doesn't surprise me, and I'm glad. But I do think that there's probably a lot more that we can do in a proactive sense to help young people get more politically involved, more politically aware, gain a deeper practical understanding of how government works, which would help them to reduce all the cynicism that they hear in society about how government doesn't work, when in fact it works very well at this level. I just think those are critical things, and I would hope that it doesn't necessarily have to be in the language here, because when we form that task force, we can give them a charge at that time. But if we want to put something in there to that effect, that'd be fine.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to support Councilmember Mail's resolution, but I would also like to say that I'm going to bring forward a resolution that's already been written that kind of piggybacks on what Councilmember Schultz discussed about surveying those people that do not participate in city elections, specifically for tenants. And it will create groups of people that will actually teach those groups that have not participated in local elections what they need to do, what the process is. So, but I will be bringing that before the council very soon. Thank you.
Councilmember Mail.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I support the ideas that Councilmember Schultz and Councilmember Smith just described. I don't know exactly how to do it, but regarding Councilmember Schultz's second suggestion, at the bottom of page 2, we have recommend actions by the city for the elections to promote new suffrage opportunities, and it goes on from there. But we could also add new suffrage opportunities and other participation in city government. Maybe would be a way to deal with that.
Yeah,
and
something like that. I think it would do. We can leave it general for now. Right. But I mean, at the time, we're going to appoint the task force, and at that time, we can orally instruct them as to stuff. And as they proceed in their work and come back with interim reports, they'll be giving us feedback. We can give them feedback on things like that.
So I'd just like to propose to the clerk a friendly amendment or an amendment that I would support, that suffrage opportunities and other participation in city government for and by residents who have turned 16, ... Would the
clerk have the placement of that in there? Okay, and that's a friendly amendment for the seconder as well?
Yes.
And also assuming that the suggestion earlier to change the piece between 4 and 5, to change that from 221 or less to aim to get 2 appointments age 16 to 21 is also a simple change.
Agreed.
Okay, so all those are incorporated in this resolution as amended.
And just a question following up on Councilmember Schultz's first comment about the sort of survey. Has our resident survey been designed and launched already, or could we add a question, do you vote, sorry. Question about the resident survey, whether we want to add a question.
Or whether it's already past that point.
It's still on my desk, so it can certainly be added. Just wanted to go back. We were just conferring on the. You have the task force shall consist up to 11 members, but was the concept to have 2 of those 11 members? Okay, it's not an additional.
No.
2. Okay. Sorry for the clarification. And yes, I'll look at the idea about putting something on the residents survey.
The thing is about putting it on the resident survey is that those are returned voluntarily. So people who don't vote may be the same people who won't return the resume and answer the question.
Yeah, I agree with the idea of additional personal attention
Probably
to follow.
needs both. Resident survey, though, is designed to be a statistically valid sample that allows for adjustment on the ward level for certain things and on the city level for others.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're all set. So we have those various changes incorporated as friendly amendments. We took citizen comment. We were back to the council. Is there any additional council comment? Okay, I think we're ready to vote then. All those in favor of this resolution affirming the right to vote and setting up the various pieces, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. No. We now have a consent agenda. It has 4 items on it. The resolution supporting state funding for the renovation of the Essex House, and 3 resolutions providing for appointments to the Arts and Humanities Commission, the Personnel Appeals Board, and the Nuclear Free Tacoma Park Committee. Would somebody like to move the consent agenda?
I'll move it.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Schutz, seconded by Councilmember Grimes. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda passes unanimously. We are now at our last item for the evening, which is a work session discussion of proposed resolution revisions to the Tacoma Park Code Title VI Housing, and this is outstanding items. And we're being joined by Ms. Daines and...
I'm sorry, Mayor, just a question. Did
Yes.
we address this as part of the consent agenda already? Is that, it's just a...
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe also City Attorney is here as well.
This is the last of our regular conversations regarding proposed changes to Housing Code Chapter 6 or Title 6 in the city ordinance. What we're hoping to do tonight is bring back to you some of the unfinished pieces that came up during past discussions. So if you look at your cover memorandum, it includes a variety of things, not every specific section of the chapter, but those areas where we left unfinished, or we had asked the council initially for some input on possible changes to the code. So what we're hoping to do is to answer or resolve some of those issues, and then there'll be a public hearing next week on the code in its entirety, and following that, a second public hearing specific to the access to multifamily residential facilities, which Ken is going to talk about first. We're going to bounce back and forth a little bit, so we'll go with that.
Okay. Regarding the provision allowing for access to multifamily properties by candidates and city staff, we have just made the changes requested by the council at the last hearing or just work session. The one question that was unanswered at the time was whether staff was comfortable eliminating volunteers from the definition of city employees, and they were. So that has been removed, and everything else the council had requested. If there are any further questions on it, I can field those now.
Any questions on that part?
The main substantive change that you all had asked for was the elimination of some of the detailed requirements about, or limitations on conduct when somebody's accessing property.
And those are on page 4.
Did we address NGOs having access, or that was?
I don't feel that we can give them access. I think we're limited to candidates and city employees.
Okay.
I think we would open the door to allowing too many people into the units.
It would have to open the door to everybody.
Right.
Okay. Sounds like people are,
Wait, are we on 616 as well?
Yes, that, as it relates to, that's in the landlord-tenant code as opposed to just in the housing chapter.
Right, so I do have a comment on that.
so, but I thought we were just in the first piece. We'd only gotten to 604. Is that where we are?
In the interest of, or in an attempt to make things simpler, and when it sounds like I've confused things, you'll note on each of the bullet points on the cover memo,
Right.
I have generally 2 different sections. I combine them or put them on the same section because they relate to one another. So, for example, Ken's language regarding access to multifamily residential facilities also brings in a section that's in the landlord-tenant code that does the requirement regarding the distribution of materials by the landlords.
Gotcha.
So they're sort of thematic, if you will.
Okay.
And
So-
no changes to
yes.
that section.
Right. So then on page 6, under 616, obligations of landlords, I do have a comment, which is the original draft of this included language approximating what I'm about to say that I think should be reinstated. After the first sentence in section M that talks about distributing to tenants a city-supplied electoral and civic information packet, I would reinsert the language 1 packet or comma 1 packet for each occupant of voting age. Simply because if we're distributing voter registration forms, then there should be sufficient forms for each person who's of voting age.
I believe the reason that that was removed was staff was concerned that there are not, the landlords don't necessarily know the ages of the residents of a rental unit. And the thinking was that if the information was provided to them, then they could register online. Or
I'd be happy with saying the landlord is obligated to make available 1 packet for each occupant of voting age.
That would be at the point of initial tenancy, correct?
Within 7 days of the commencement of a new tenancy.
Okay.
Right, if new people move in, I wouldn't expect a landlord to monitor that kind of situation. What we're doing here is a step toward automatic voter registration. The City of Tacoma Park controls very few of the governmental interactions, or I should say mediates very few of the governmental interactions that could trigger automatic voter registration. We don't mediate school enrollments, we don't do driver's license applications, we don't do marriage licenses. All of these things could involve new voters, such as driver's license applications. They could involve people who have newly moved to a neighborhood and need to change their registration, such as school enrollments or marriage licenses. But we do muddle with the affairs of landlords and tenants. Therefore, we shouldn't waste an opportunity by providing an insufficient number of voter registration forms. The point is to try to get as many potential voters registered, informed and registered as possible. Therefore, we should, if we're going to ask landlords to distribute packets, the landlords can reasonably be asked to make one packet available for each occupant of voting age. And that can be determined by a simple question: how many packets do you want?
I think it's one thing to say that we want to ask the landlords to ask.
We
It's
want
another
to require
thing.
the landlords to offer.
It's-
We're not asking, we're requiring.
Well, then if you require them, you've got to have an or else there, too, because how do you enforce that requirement? How do you know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? I mean, just purely from a practical point of view. I mean, it's okay to say required. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just sort of saying that, we require people to pick up after their dog. We don't have the police out trying to make them do that. So we have a lot of laws like that, ordinances like that. But just understand that this is an imposition.
I believe the landlord-tenant code has some kind of umbrella penalty related to noncompliance. Is that the case?
Right, it would be a code, a Class C code violation. I guess it would require a complaint, most likely by the tenant, to discover a violation.
This is the sort of thing that I don't think we need to hit anyone over the head with it regarding compliance, but if we detect any kind of frequency of noncompliance, then we can consider ways to tighten it.
Yeah. Send them back to training camp.
So it's, if you'll forgive me, so you want to change the first sentence to distribute to all new
Tenants.
voters of voting, or all new tenants of voting age, city
Yeah,
supplies?
yeah. Well, it can be distribute to new tenants a city-supplied packet. I would put a separate clause in there, offering one packet for each occupant of voting age.
And can you tell me what's going to be in these packets?
You already have packets now that are available? I thought I
No.
remembered something.
Excuse me. I do not believe so.
We need to
I
clarify.
mean, general information packets.
There is a newcomers packet that's
Right.
available for people that come to the city and building and ask for one.
So, for this packet that we're going to provide to new tenants, can we have the website prominently displayed so that if people want to register online, they have that option?
Yes, that would be required, as well as the form, and then paragraph 2 leaves open the city's options as far as what else is going to be required, as long as it relates to existing policy and it's not advocating for new policies. We can have it put in the package.
I see that, it's going to be included in number 1 or under the packet shall include the following, but can you have it prominently displayed so that people don't have to go and search for it? They just could see it.
That's our job. It's not really we're in here, but it's our responsibility, yes.
Okay.
Shouldn't be a problem.
Great, thank you.
I think the aim here is clear. It's a theme that I've already mentioned and others have earlier this evening of inclusion, and I trust the administration, city administration, to put this together and give us an opportunity to comment if we wish.
So your proposal was for adding some language in the last sentence of the section M that or is it the second?
First sentence.
First sentence.
After between the first and second.
So just, if somebody can repeat that language, and then we can say yes and move on.
Within 7 calendar days of the commencement of a new tenancy, distribute to the new tenants a city-supplied electoral and civic information packet, offering one packet for each voter.
Occupant of voting age.
For each occupant of voting age.
Okay, everybody happy with that one?
Yeah.
Next. So we're finished with the first set of bulleted points.
Okay. If you could turn to page 7 of the memo. We have language that we're proposing as a follow-up to our conversation in February regarding the licensing of rental properties. Staff had proposed registering owner-occupied group homes or group houses, and what we have at the top of the page is the proposed registration process and requirements, and at the bottom, the definition of an owner-occupied group home. If you could go to the definition first, what we've done is added the phrase non-related individuals, and then the last two sentences clarifying what the actual housing arrangements are from a physical standpoint, and reinforcing that the people living in an owner-occupied group home are not considered tenants for the purposes of the rest of the chapter, which is what is currently the case. As far as the registration process is concerned, we're proposing that owner-occupied group houses be registered before the end of June 2014, so that would be basically a year from the time this ordinance is adopted, or within 30 calendar days of a group house being established. We would require that the property owner apply for a certificate of registration with fairly straightforward information needed to just administer the registration database, if you will, and that there would be a $50 registration fee, and then upon receipt of the application and the registration fee, the city inspector would go out and verify that there were no serious life safety code violations in existence. And we've identified examples of what would constitute serious life safety issues. And as you can see, they're very specific and have primarily or more to do with whether or not you can get out of the house in case of a fire, if you have running water, if the smoke detector system is operational, as opposed to if there's chipping, peeling paint, or cracks in the wall, or other types of property maintenance code issues that are considered when they're going through and doing a licensing, rental housing licensing inspection. Assuming that the property passes that basic life safety inspection, a certificate of registration would be issued and would be valid for a 3-year period.
Those seem like pretty basic requirements.
They are basic requirements, and they're proposed based on observations we've made regarding homes that do not technically fall, or that do not fall under rental housing licensing requirements, but we do have concerns regarding the ability of the people to get out of the house in case of a fire. So that's what our primary concern is, that it's a safe place, and that it would be a safe place at least at the time that we're going through and doing the inspection. As with all property maintenance code things, life changes or can change 15 minutes after the inspector leaves the house, but at that point in time it would be considered safe.
I guess my question is the number of occupants. So if it's a family member, so if I have my son or daughter move in, it's not a group house, but if it happens to be somebody else, just a single individual, then it is a group house? Technically,
yes, and that's the way it's worded now. Right now, the code defines an owner-occupied group house as a single-family dwelling occupied by the owner or as his or her principal residence or a family member, and by one or more other individuals. So right now, technically, it would be an owner-occupied group home. There's been some debate internally at the staff level as to whether or not we need to add and other non-related individuals paying rent, to clarify or to drill down even further, being that those people are there not because you're related to them, but because it's an affordable housing option for them.
Right. I mean, it seems like it's creating additional work for the city that I'm not sure is necessary for a visitor to be there for an extended period of time.
And that would be addressed by adding the word,
Huh?
and that could be addressed by adding the phrase
Right.
paying rent.
Right. So I guess I would propose amending this to say paying rent.
Because it seems like that's the aim here, is to deal with a situation that kind of falls between various definitions, but is providing housing to somebody on an ongoing basis where there are obligations on their part to pay rent, and getting some basic life safety concerns addressed in return.
And we can do that, and I would, it may come back a little differently, but it would probably be added at the very end of the first sentence, and just individuals paying rent.
I'll leave it to you on where's best to add
Yeah.
it.
Are people generally okay with that? Did you have concerns about that or something else?
Yeah, I do. Suppose you have an individual, say a retired person who lives in a home, single-family home, and they decide to take in a boarder, sort of an old-fashioned term, but like, say, a college student. That would, by what I'm reading here, would that meet the definition?
It meets the current definition of owner-occupied group house, and it would also fall into that category with this new definition.
Then that would require that person then to have an inspection and pay $50. I know where you're coming from with this, is that we've got single-family houses that are intentionally being overpopulated and divvied up into small little rooms where people are living sort of without exterior access, and it's really kind of a negligent living arrangement on the part of the property owner, and the people who are renting those spaces are grateful to have incredibly cheap space and don't understand what their risks are in terms of safe egress or anything like that. And we have those, I know in my ward, you've told me about it, probably elsewhere in the city. I believe that's where this language has been derived, so that we can get a handle and create protection for such occupants.
Correct.
Just trying to figure out how we can make the distinction between having the first example be subjected to some sort of inspection process and paperwork process where all they're trying to do is just, pick up a little extra rent, occupy a room that's sitting vacant, or help out somebody who's a friend or a friend of a friend. Paying rent isn't going to make that distinction. But I don't have a better idea, I'm afraid.
I mean, one option might be to identify the number of non-related individuals living in the house.
Like if it's more
but
than
frankly, it would be really hard, because if someone said there's an owner-occupied group home and we notified them, and say one of the houses in your particular ward, all they would, by identifying specific numbers of people, it creates another layer of opportunity to avoid the whole process. So
I understand.
it creates some challenges just from an administrative and enforcement standpoint. Not that they can't be overcome, but
Let me ask it in this way. Based on your knowledge, which is probably, not 100%, but how many of these sort of difficult situations, the one that you're really concerned about, do you think would be captured under this heading throughout the city? Do you have an idea?
a ballpark would be anywhere from 5 to a dozen.
5 to a dozen?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Frankly, the circumstances that you're talking about now, those are not the problems.
Mhm.
It's when there's a house where there are chock-a-block full of people.
And I guess that's the issue is how do we draw the line so it gets the ones we're really after and not gets the other ones.
And we've had those debates at the staff level, because frankly, we're viewing this as sort of a service to the people that are living in the house, as opposed to a punitive type of thing.
Yeah, it's a health, safety, and welfare issue.
Yeah, and
But I mean, we could carry that to the extreme too and say, well, that's family members. They need to be kept safe too. I mean, where do we
That's
draw
true.
the line? How far do we impose government into people's homes?
I agree. The argument with this is that it's not a family member, and that they are perhaps placing themselves in a potentially dangerous situation without being aware of the fact that it is a dangerous situation.
Then
One would
maybe
hope you keep your own family
maybe
members in a
education's
safe
better way.
place, yeah.
I would think that requiring more than one person, it would make it harder to enforce, because chances are staff is going to hear from one person, so they know there's one person renting a room in a house. But then it'll be on the staff to kind of figure out who else lives there, figure out if they're subject to the regulation. And the other concern I have is that if you're talking about a one-bedroom apartment, then adding one renter could be, or a one-bedroom condominium, adding one renter could be creating a overcrowding condition. And the requirements are, it's a 3-year, or once every 3-year registration requirement with a $50 fee, so it's not the same as a rental housing license.
And it seems like if we're just talking about potentially up to a dozen of these, we can try it with this, and if there's a problem, we'll know about it and we can adjust.
I'm sure you guys will find out about it if it becomes a problem.
That's up to a
Yeah.
dozen of the
Of
problem
the problem
ones. Yeah,
ones.
but
There are undoubtedly more.
The question is, what's
Yeah.
the collateral damage, as they say?
Yeah.
And also, what's the impact on staff time?
We are out at a lot of these on a regular basis
Of the 12 problems.
anyway. One of the options you have is to establish a sunset clause for this particular thing, where we come back after a year, for example, and see, well, maybe 2 years, because we're giving people a year to actually go through the registration process and see if it's working or how much time it's actually involved. One of the possible outcomes of this is that we will identify unlicensed rental facilities that right now have been arguing that they're owner-occupied group homes. So there may be, there could be a variety of different types of outcomes as a result of this registration process.
So right now, if it was an apartment building with the owner living there, he could call it an owner-occupied group home?
We have a couple of landlords that have done that.
I know the man's name, too.
Mhm. He just pulls his stoves whenever we come over. Yeah.
I like the idea of the sunset.
And I believe we can do that for can we do that for just one section?
Definitely, yes.
I would support that.
Is it likely that this section would more or less be enforced pretty much on a complaint basis in any case?
Yes.
So that if the retired individual who rents to a college student, you're not likely to go do and even know about it until the college student complains, or and so it would be like several ordinances we have in the city that they're there on the books and they're only effectuated, or in other words, enforced on the basis of complaint, and it works. I mean, it's like the one where parking is restricted for a car in any one spot on a public street except for 72 hours. And that allows the police to do what they have to do when a situation arises that they need to get a car off the street.
Generally, that is true. We would be notified of these by complaint, and that's how we've been made aware of many of them. Though I must let you know up front that we have a handful of them that we will personally notify them that they need to register.
Because they've already been a complaint.
Yes, exactly.
I can see you're licking your chops.
No, I don't do that. But
I'm sorry,
my
I
code
was not
enforcement
lady.
stuff might be. So we really want to go in there and see if it's safe because it doesn't look safe. So if we added a 2-year sunset clause, would people be comfortable with this?
So if we've added the paying rent as part of it and the 2-year sunset, any objection?
No objection.
Okay, good.
Next section is the, it's on page 8 and 9, the utility transfer section. And what we've done with this section is tried to better integrate it with rent control, and those are reflected in changes in paragraphs A on page 8 and I on page 9, where we just clarify that the rent reductions for units subject to rent control carry with the unit. It's not just for the current tenant. For non-rent controlled units, this only protects existing tenants during their tenancy from being given responsibility for paying for their utilities, which in effect is a rent increase. We also separated the substantive requirements, which are now in paragraph E, which dictate how rent reductions are to be calculated before they can be transferred, the utilities can be transferred to the tenant, with the notice requirements that just make it clear that existing tenants have to be given due notice, prospective tenants have to be given notice that they may become responsible for the utilities during their tenancy. And that's really all we're doing there.
These changes were made at the. These changes were made based on public feedback we received from one of the property owners concerned about the issue regarding existing and future tenants.
So how do you define Unreasonable. At section 3, I guess section E, paragraph 3.
An example of when it would be unreasonable to use the standard formula would be if there's a unit that has a large family that uses a lot of water or electricity, or for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense to peg that utility cost to that unit. So it would be on a case-by-case basis.
And staff would make that determination?
Well, the landlord would, who would have more knowledge, would be responsible for indicating that I think we should deviate from this formula.
But any rent reduction or utility transfer would have to be approved by staff.
Okay.
So it's not creating an opportunity for a landlord to come out ahead. It's just helps allocate the increases amongst the units properly.
Okay, any questions on that one? No. Okay. Next section.
Retaliation.
And the next section is retaliation. We had looked into the possibility of the city enacting its own retaliation ordinance. I think there's too much doubt as to whether we have that authority. So what we're proposing here is just incorporating both the new state code on retaliation and the Montgomery County Code on retaliation, and providing that we will apply the law that provides the most protections to tenants in Tacoma Park, and then we also added a provision giving Colta express authority to make the same awards of damages that the court can under the state code.
Questions on that?
So do you think this is going to help tenants, or?
I think in some circumstances, the county law may provide some protection that the state law would not provide.
Any problems with this section? Next section.
If you turn to page 11, sorry. If you turn to page 11 of the memo, we're moving on to rent stabilization. The last time we chatted about this was on March 18th, and during that discussion we identified proposed language regarding the establishment of base rents for units that had been discontinued for a period of time. The original, or the current code right now, has a cutoff date of July 2007, I believe, that if a property is not licensed at that point in time and has not since been licensed, that once its rental license is reestablished, they can start off from scratch with a new base rent at market levels. When we went through and revised or proposed our revisions to the ordinance, we eliminated that date and that sort of time period. In response to feedback we received from a property owner on Maple, we acknowledged that we had eliminated that option and have proposed this language that clarifies our original intent. So if you go under definitions, we have clearly identified what a discontinued rental unit is, and it's basically something that's been formally discontinued by the landlord. There is a process that we do now under the current code that staff has systematized, if you will, regarding the landlord is required to notify us that if they're not going to be renting a unit any longer, and that can be for a variety of reasons. They just don't want to rent. They're moving into it, they're selling it, and the new owner's moving into it, or it's in such a physical condition that it's no longer rentable. So if a unit has been formally discontinued, that qualifies as a discontinued rental unit, not just someone saying I haven't rented it for years. And then existing rental unit is fairly straightforward. What we're proposing is that the rents for a discontinued rental unit that has been discontinued for less than 5 years, that the rents would have to go back to the point that the unit was discontinued and the annual rent increase allowance applied. So, for example, if a landlord discontinued their rental license for a unit in 2011 and then reestablished it and relicensed it this year, we would go back to the base rent that they were charging in 2011 and apply the annual rent increase allowance for the subsequent years to get the new rent that they can charge their tenant. If, and this is in B2, and this addresses the issues that were identified by the property owner on Maple, if the unit has been discontinued for a period of 5 years or more, then they can reestablish the new base rent. So the first person that moves in, they rent to them at market rate. That's the starting point for all future rents because it's a rent-stabilized unit. So if I had a two-bedroom that I had discontinued 6 years ago and decided that I'm going to rent it and I can get $2,500 a month for the rent, that's my new base rent. And then every year after that, I apply the annual rent increase allowance.
Are we in a position where we're defining something in a different way and either giving people an opportunity or not giving people an opportunity to say, well, I discontinued it at this point in time, but I didn't know that I had to notify you, and therefore, can I notify you retroactively?
They would not be.
Are we setting them up for something like that?
We are, with the current language. You define in the current language, discontinued means there's been an application for discontinuation. So take the scenario where a unit has been unoccupied for 6 years, and only then does the person file an application for discontinuation. According to your definition of discontinuation in here, that first 6 years wouldn't count. I would actually ask for...
If I could explain the process that we do now?
Why can't we make this simpler? Why can't it be simply where the... there's also a case where there's a discontinuity in owner. Someone buys a unit that has been vacant and so on. Why can't it simply be where the landlord has able to demonstrate that the unit has been unoccupied for 5 years or more? Why require an application here? Do you have this application, and what are the standards going to be?
We have an application. It's been in use for many, many years. It's required right now in the current law that a landlord has to notify the city within 15 days if they make any changes to their rental property. Changes are considered discontinuing a unit, pulling it from the inventory, if you will, transferring the ownership, changes in agents, contact information, and all of that. Because of the processes that we use now for a licensing thing, if you're billed for a rental license 1 year, you're going to be billed for a rental license the next year. And trust me, when we get somebody who's not renting anymore and they get a bill, they notify us right away that I'm not renting this anymore. I don't want to pay this thing or this fee. So we send them a discontinuation notice, a form, say fill it out. And when they fill it out and give it back to us, we then contact the finance office and tell them to void out the charge, and it's discontinued.
Well, so potentially a year could go by when the property has been vacant before it's officially discontinued according to the definition here.
Correct, though the current law requires the property owner to notify us within 15 days if something like that happens.
once again, what if what if a property owner dies and the heirs just let it sit? Sometimes the bills go to nowhere. Sometimes they automatically get paid by an estate executor, for instance, without any kind of reflection. What if the landlord wants to keep the unit on the market and pays that fee even though the unit is vacant? Or maybe the landlord can't fill the unit. Who knows? I see all kinds of scenarios that say that this doesn't seem adequate, that there should be some kind of mechanism for recognizing reality rather than bureaucratic filings.
The challenge that we have is with the rent stabilization ordinance. A majority of the property owners do not care much for rent stabilization. So if the intent is to maintain those rents at affordable levels within the parameters of the rent stabilization ordinance, it is important that we maintain some integrity to that. So,
5 years gives plenty of room for integrity.
right, but what you're talking about is going retroactively, saying, I've gotten licenses for 5 years, but I really haven't been renting them.
Is that a problem? Why is that a problem?
Because during that 5-year period, not only have the property owner been required to pay a rental license fee, they've also been required to notify us if their units are vacant or not. They have to identify when the tenant has moved in, what they're charging for rent, and what the date that their rent increase went into effect. This is all part of the current ordinance and has been in place for a number of years.
Right. Well, we're engaged in changing the current ordinance,
can
so
change
why
that.
not fix this? A family member of mine paid, I think it was for 3 years in AOL, $14.95 a month fee for email service that AOL transitioned to being free. Sometimes things just happen automatically and you just don't pay any attention to them. I'd rather see a change here that reflects the reality of a vacant unit. The intent of keeping the unit vacant doesn't really come into place as far as I'm concerned. We can see if colleagues here agree with that. If a unit has been vacant for 5 years, I don't think too many rational people make decisions to keep a rental unit vacant for 5 years in order to jack up the rent at the end of that time.
And that's why we're proposing that it be tied to the discontinuation notice.
Right, and I'm calling that a bureaucratic device that is not reflective of reality, given that you're creating an artificial definition of discontinued here as meaning someone has filed a bureaucratic piece of paper rather than having the plain common usage of discontinuation, which means an interruption that has no resumption up to a certain point.
The other option we have is to keep the language that's in the ordinance currently, which says that if you are unlicensed as of this date in 2007, that when you re-rent the unit, that you can establish your own base rent. We had proposed creating this 5-year window of opportunity so that, because 2007, when it's 2015, it's more than 5 years.
So why not make a simple change to the current law that says 5 years prior to the date of re-renting? Instead of 2007, we change it to 5 years, for at least 5 years.
That's what this is intended to do.
But it does it in a more complicated fashion than simply changing since 2007 to for at least 5 years. Seems like a simple change that would accomplish the same thing.
I mean, I think one concern and kind of the basis for this whole section is people will do amazing things to get out from under rent control and to go back to market rents, and I think that we would have a problem with people saying, "Oh, I haven't been renting this for 5 years, and I need to go to market rents."
If they can demonstrate that, then why is that a problem? Do you really think that people will keep units off the market for 5 years, not charging any kind of rent, that is, they can occupy it themselves, in order to jack up the rent?
No, I mean, I think the concern is they won't keep them vacant, but they will claim to have.
Right, so you require proof. I mean, how do you what are the standards in this discontinuation application? How do you know that when someone files the application, the person hasn't been secretly renting the unit? How do you know that someone isn't secretly renting a unit right now, circumventing the rent control law? I don't see any greater risk in what I'm suggesting than in the current situations?
The documentation that's required for the discontinuation notice varies depending upon the reason for the change in status of the license. If it's discontinued and they're not renting it anymore, they work with the code enforcement staff to go out and they will do a physical inspection to make sure that that unit is not occupied, not available for rent. If they have discontinued or transferred the license because of a change in ownership, they can either bring in their HUD forms noting the purchase of the property, or if they've moved into the unit, for example, they can bring in their voter registration form or their driver's license to note that that is now where they're currently living. So we do provide documentation for that discontinued.
So someone files for discontinuation. Do you periodically check for indefinitely once because you have to prove that you have to establish that the unit has been vacant for that continuous 5-year period, uninterrupted 5-year period. How do you know that a person hasn't filed a notice and then a year later gone and rented it out?
We don't.
So
what we're looking at this is it's primarily intended as a mechanism to establish when the unit was discontinued. If they go and they can rent it again 6 days later, and unless we get a complaint, we're not going to know about it. And there are a number of unlicensed rental facilities out there. Councilmember Smith can attest to that. We just do the best we can, and based on our experience using the phrase discontinued rental unit and referring and relying on the processes that we already have in place, this seemed to be the easiest way to do it. If the council would like, we can go back and have a conversation regarding rent stabilization and to see how this might play into that.
Well, for instance, the particular people whom you're aware of in the 7100 block of Maple, did they file a discontinuation notice in whenever year it is? I'm curious. I don't know.
Yes, they did.
Okay. So they're taken care of, but I could see where there would be other cases. So to me, the simplest would be a minor alteration to existing code, which Mr. Sigmund suggested, I believe, a few minutes ago, that would remove the words 2007 and some other words surrounding 2007 and replace it with in the previous 5 years. Has not been occupied since 2007 becomes has not been occupied in the previous 5 years. Why not just make that simple change?
We've done that. That's what this new language does.
Well, no, I see stuff about discontinued rental units, which has a meaning that is defined here as contrary to the plain meaning of the word discontinued, and that doesn't accommodate people who have not filed the notice, which it seems extremely reasonable to me to accommodate people who haven't filed that notice. It's a bureaucratic device. It's not friendly to people who are not living their lives as bureaucrats.
It's a council decision regarding how you'd like to do
Right.
this.
So I would advocate retaining the current code here. In fact, I'll move retaining the current code with the simple substitution of in the previous 5 years. I don't have that code in front of me, unfortunately. Well, I do, but I can't articulate this in a good enough fashion. In the previous 5 years rather than on July 1st, 2007.
The current code has a specific date, and it talks about whether or not it's licensed or not licensed. The occupancy is not part of the code.
How did you determine 5 years?
It seemed like a reasonable number.
So we could say 2.5 years.
You could
3
say
years.
2.5 years, you could say 20 years. 5 years seemed to be an appropriate number based on the date that's already in the ordinance.
Councilmember Romeo.
I support the intent of our rent control policies to protect renters and to maintain affordable housing in the community. I support bureaucracy when it can be implemented fairly efficiently. The nice thing about bureaucracy is it creates a standard of proof in this case. The standard of proof is, did you file a pretty straightforward form, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
It's 1 page, 5 pages, 2 pages?
2 pages.
2 pages, thank you. Saying that if the owner can prove that a unit wasn't occupied, so who's to decide what proof is? I don't know how you implement that consistently in every case. If we sat here and thought of all the hypotheticals where somebody might come in with something, well, I can prove that it wasn't occupied. I don't know how to deal with that. But this to me seems like a fairly straightforward approach to deal with 98%, 99% of all the situations. In particular, I mean, what we're talking about is whether it's been, it's technically been unoccupied for 6 years, but because the person failed to file the form in the first year, we only have it reported as 5 or 4. I'm sorry, it's been technically unoccupied for 5, but we only have a form saying it's been unoccupied for 4. So then the person has to wait a year, or they have to come to us and plead their case and provide that proof to us. That's not going to happen that often.
Come to the city.
Come to the city.
Well, there's no mechanism for that. There's no mechanism for a retroactive reset to an earlier date.
If there was some hypothetical technical situation where someone, hadn't filed their form in 1 year, I can't imagine they couldn't come to the council, prove their case.
I don't want to deal with that.
We won't have to, because it's not going to come up. I mean, this is a
Why
really bizarre.
Why not fix this so that that loophole is closed? Why not have a mechanism for retroactive granting of a discontinuation notice?
But what's the standard of proof if your unit's been unoccupied?
I am sitting here and not prepared to come up with that. It's simply something I haven't given any thought to before the session.
I mean, do you show bank statements showing that you haven't received rent for 5 years?
I don't know.
My sense, I asked this question. I wondered about it. In the course of the conversation, it occurred to me that there's a whole lot of incentive and a whole lot of process that begs somebody to file that form because they've been at some point in the past rented a unit, and there are things that happen every year that require them to comply with those rental regulations, with paying of fees, and gives them ample opportunity to have the answer come back from the city. Well, if you're not renting it, you can avoid the fees, you can avoid the problems, you can avoid all of this by filing this simple form. I can't imagine that too many people would go, I'm not going to file the form, I'm just going to ignore all this and continue to run up bills that I either pay or don't pay
What's the
to
size of
remain
the
in
fee?
compliance.
What's the yearly fee for one unit?
It's either 101 or 110 per unit.
That's not an extraordinary amount.
There's also inspections.
Yeah, so that people would
what about
try
an
to
estate
schedule to come in
scenario?
there every year.
What about an estate scenario where someone has died and an executor pays it out of autopilot, and maybe the family who inherits the property doesn't live anywhere near here and doesn't know the difference and so on?
They have to physically fill out a renewal form for the licenses. So when a property goes through an estate thing, we will notify them that they have to go through that renewal process because they don't typically do it. So we notify them, and then that's when we find out that the person who owns the property has passed away, and we'll do it
So
that
how about
way.
automatic discontinuation if the unit is not renewed, or is that something you're doing already?
We do not automatically discontinue units.
That would satisfy me. I can buy what Councilmember Mail was saying about a year. What about automatic discontinuation if the license is not renewed?
I'd say 75% of the licenses that we issue on an annual basis are not renewed within the 30 days that they're required to pay. So we have to go through and send out notices and second notices.
You basically have everybody pulling out of rent control.
Well, if that was the criteria,
then
then
they would be illegally
yeah.
renting units. You don't have to do the discontinuation after a first notice. You do whatever you normally do, but if the thing's not paid after some period of time, then you declare it discontinued.
I'd like to have a term.
Maybe. Councilmember Schultz.
It just seems to me that, bureaucracy sort of has a negative connotation, but frankly, the day rent stabilization was invented, everybody knew that you were going to create a paperwork nightmare, that it was going to require bureaucracy. And that's what it is. And given human nature, like Kenneth was saying a little while ago, people's tendency not to want to have to pay fees, not to follow rules, to maximize their profit, and to cheat as much as they can get away with without feeling too guilty about it, they're going to do that. And the only way, if everybody was going to be honest, we wouldn't have all the rules that we have. But that's not the way the real world works. My feeling is that, well, we up here haven't had time to give this any consideration.
That's true.
Staff has had years and years to give this consideration for as long as this has been on the books. And I think trying to debureaucratize, if that's a word, one section of this whole rent stabilization ordinance just doesn't make sense. I think we need to respect staff's recommendation. The people that have units are accustomed to filing these forms. I would that they didn't have to, because I'm sure staff would agree that they would rather not have to have any forms at all. I just don't see how we can try to simplify things that resist simplification. Basically I'm supporting what you proposed. The only question I would say is, why 5 years? Maybe 4.9 years or 4 years or 3.8 or something. But other than that, I just think this is the way it needs to be. I'm sure if you thought there was a way that you could experiment with a different approach, you would probably want to suggest that, but I'm not hearing that.
This seemed to be the most logical way of going about doing it based on the information that we have for a majority of the properties in Tacoma Park.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I have had some experience in this, and I would suggest that we try to make it as simple as possible. Being on the Commission of Landlord-Tenant Affairs, landlords come before the commission and they have all types of issues trying to follow rent stabilization. I support affordable housing. I think it's very important, but we're in Tacoma Park, we're doing a lot of different things now with MHP, CPDC, and now the city's own rent stabilization laws. But if we can streamline the requirements for landlords, it would be very helpful. I'm not saying taking away rent stabilization. I'm just saying making it so that the amount of paperwork that is required, we try to limit it, but come up with the same results. Thank you.
But it sounds like the discontinued rental unit paperwork already exists and is used.
Right. And it's linked to the licensing program, not the rent stabilization program.
Councilmember Grimes.
I'm curious what happens currently if a landlord doesn't respond to the renewal. Is it a renewal application? I'm sorry, I don't recall that.
There's a renewal application form.
Each year. And
Each year.
so the landlord doesn't respond, doesn't send in a check. What happens then?
We issue them a notice of violation, and then if they don't respond to that, then we'll issue them a citation and go to court. While we're doing that, the finance office will then send them late notices and late fees that accrue over time.
Are those forgiven if the landlord comes back to you and says, oh, no, I didn't do this because it was vacant? How does that work?
If they come back and they file a discontinuation form and verify that the property is no longer available for rent or they don't own it anymore, then we'll waive that.
So what do you do if the landlord doesn't renew and the unit continues to be occupied by a paying renter?
Then we go and issue them a notice of violation, issue a citation if we don't get any response, and then we'll go to court for operating an illegal rental facility.
Which there's plenty of.
Which we have done, and there are many out there that I'm assuming we're not aware of. Yeah.
How do you,
We usually get it resolved before we go to court.
Well, what kind of units are you not aware of? Presumably not ones in large buildings, multi-unit
No,
buildings.
those are easy. It's the
Right.
ones that are in single-family homes primarily.
Like we had on 1114 Jackson, which is now boarded. But
Which
there were,
we were advised was an owner-occupied group home.
but it turned out that
Yeah.
what we learned was what?
I think there were 4 apartments or 5 apartments in that single-family house. Yeah.
Is the application available online?
Yes. What I can do is, well,
You know, the situation here is I have no expertise in this, but I'm being asked to vote on it, and I want to have some of these things seem straightforward, other ones seem less straightforward, and I want to have some idea that I am voting the right way, and that part of that is investigating whether this makes sense to me as a common person, because that's what I am.
what we can do is we can send you a copy of the annual letter that we send out to all of the landlords notifying them what they need to do, the 5 steps that are required to get a license.
Does that mention discontinuation?
Yes. In the second sentence of the first paragraph or the second paragraph of the letter, it says if you no longer own this building or if it's not being rented, notify us by this date and to discontinue the license. We can send you the application form itself, and I can also send you a copy of the discontinuation letter. I think they call it now a change of status form, but that's what it is.
So this is a work session. We have a public hearing on all of this next week, and then we will come back to it again.
I do have one extremely simple suggested change, which is under B, rents for discontinued units, under the number 2. On the second line, when it says when it is first rented to a tenant, I suggest putting in the word newly, when it is first newly rented to a tenant. You can take that or leave it.
I'll propose that we agree that we may need to revisit this. We'll get some additional information. We'll keep it the way it is for the moment. We'll go to the public hearing, and then we'll have an opportunity to revisit this after we've seen some additional information, including the forms that the city sends.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask one very small follow-up question? The landlord on Maple Avenue, I know that I believe you emailed them back today. Did you get any follow-up from them indicating satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the language? No? Okay, thank you.
I had actually responded to his thing the end of April, or a couple of weeks ago, telling him what we were proposing and didn't get any feedback from him then either.
Okay. I think we have, one more set of questions?
Moving on to tenant opportunity to purchase, and this begins on page 13. This is the chapter that deals with giving the landlords being required to give a tenant opportunity to purchase a rental facility once it goes on the market. What we have done is eliminate from the applicability section the reference to under a will, living trust, or in-state distribution. In speaking with this, Linda Perlman, the Assistant City Attorney, it's redundant. Those tend not to be sales, but transfer of ownership, but not technically a sale. So that has been deleted. I believe that was identified by Councilmember Grimes as being problematic. We have also expanded the definition of the word sale, and that's at the bottom of page 13, to include changes in ownership like you see with the Essex House or MHP with their properties. Basically, it stays with the same entity, but for financing reasons, primarily property tax or the low-income housing tax credit and things, they will transfer ownership to a new LLC or a new entity to facilitate that financing package, when the reality is it's still owned by MHP or the Essex House. The way the ordinance is written now, whenever they go through and do a refinancing package or refinancing proposal like that, it's considered a sale, and they have to notify the tenants of their opportunity to purchase the building. which adds additional time to the process, and while it has not to date, could potentially create some interesting conversations if the tenants decided that they wanted to purchase a property when in reality it wasn't technically available for sale. So we've added the language, the third sentence, and I apologize for not giving you a red line for this, but the third and fourth sentence in that first paragraph in the definition of sale has been added to address that issue.
Councilmember Schultz.
Is there any parallel between your definition of a sale or not a sale and the imposition of a recordation tax that the state of Maryland imposes anytime there's a property transfer?
Not that I'm aware.
I mean, because I was just thinking that if there were, you might be able to use that as your...
Use that as a definition.
As a definition.
I can talk to Linda about that. That might be a good idea. Might be shorter.
Right.
Other questions? Any issues with this pending additional information about the suggestion just made? Okay. Anything else?
I just wanted to point out, if you think back when we were talking about the property maintenance code, we had sort of polled you all in terms of whether or not it would be appropriate to include language restricting the establishment of parking facilities in front yards. We've done some additional research, and based on the zoning changes that have been implemented by the county, we do not feel that that is needed. I have a sheet that I can pass out at the end of the meeting that summarizes the zoning changes, but basically they've enacted an ordinance that restricts the amount of or how much your front yard can be covered by a surfaced area. So in R60 zones, it's 35%, and that's just to the front area. In other residential zones, it's 30%. And they've also established how many vehicles can be parked on a square feet of paved surface. So rather than add to the bureaucracy of it all, we're suggesting we just stick with the zoning ordinance.
Okay. That's helpful. And so you might as well pass that out.
I will hand that around. Actually, this is really interesting. We found it the other day, and it's great.
And I believe that finishes our work for the evening. We're adjourned.